Okay, I think that's been announced to everybody. Okay, I think we are just about ready to start here. People will trickle in, I think. We have two of the top eight here with us today. So we have Aaron Brucher, who came in third, and we have Chadwick 537, who came, what was it, fourth or fifth? Where am I? Right here. Yeah, fourth or so. So yeah, over the stream, we would like to, well, first of all, congratulate all the top eight players who made it as far as they did, and to thank them again for participating. And we just wanted to pick their brains and discuss some of the decisions that they made, and kind of get their feelings overall on how the event went and what decisions they made and so forth. And then after we've kind of gone through a casual review of everything, then we are going to settle into more of a roundtable discussion where we're going to talk about the meta and PC Errata going forward and things of that nature. But so first of all, go ahead and introduce yourselves. Who we got here?
All right, I guess I'll go first. My name's Aaron Brucher. I'm from Southern California, and I took third place at the tournament.
Right on.
Yeah, Chad Baumgart. I ended up taking, I think, fourth, and I am from the central Wisconsin area.
Right on. And hopefully later we will have a couple more people trickle in. I know that basmelis said that he wanted to show up again, so we'll see how that goes. I know that some people's schedules are a bit all over the place. And Mock, I see that you came in as well.
Hey, yeah, sorry, I'm late for this one. I forgot the time change here. Adjusted when 1500 UTC was.
Yeah, it screwed me over too. I was expecting it to be noon my time, and now it's 11. So that was delightful to
I
realize.
just got home. My son had swim class, and I was thinking this was at 1 o'clock. It's at noon my time.
Right on. Okay, well let's go ahead and start with let's see, Aaron. I think you said that you had some stuff that you had to get to later. So how about we knock you out real quick, and then we'll talk with Chadwick, and then if there's nobody else there, then we'll just dive right into errata stuff. So you had Aaron. You had a very interesting run all the way through. You were the only person in the top eight to attempt a serious corruption strategy. So tell us about it. Tell us how you came to that conclusion. Like, how did you pick the decks that you picked? And let's just hear what was going through your mind.
All right, first and foremost, thank you to the PC for actually putting the World Championship together and for everyone coming out and participating. Wouldn't have been able to be here if it weren't for you guys. But I went with corruption because I like alternative ways to win this game. I play other card games too, and I look for the alternate win conditions in there. It's just my style. It's just my way of I enjoy playing rather than race to site 9. I like direct damage builds.
Mm-hmm.
I tried archery a lot, and the wounds were capping out, and 10 burdens is just a lot easier to get to than 20 wounds to drain an entire fellowship's vitality through archery.
Right.
So that's over the years of testing, that's why I ended up settling on corruption. The combo of it wants to be found and the ring is mined and Gorgoth Stormer, that's 3 burdens, 1 site. You do that a few times, it's basically over, unless they got some type of burden removal, Sandstorm, the Hamfast, or the 12 resistant Frodo.
And even in spite of that 12 resistance
decision,
Frodo, you still burned through a couple of those, so you were definitely overpacked for that.
Yeah, I can go burst adding the burdens in movie block more so than fellowship block, because in fellowship block, my burst burden adding is mainly just on site 5 with multiple must do without hopes, and I have to draw into that with my filter fellowship side, and that's pretty much what I mirrored on movie side too. I built a dwarf deck that could filter and draw into my burden adding cards as fast as possible, and the whole idea was to just basically survive, take wounds, draw it wants to be found as quick as I could, hopefully draw into a Morgul Skulker at the right time and recycle near the later sites, and get my last little couple of burdens on site 8, site 9, and hopefully it all works out.
Yeah, we
It
definitely
did
saw you.
so for the most part.
Yeah, we definitely saw you very aggressively using Smeagol's ability and Golem's ability to just discard cards, like ruthlessly looking into the discard pile. We would frequently see some of the dwarf standbys of some of these rings and things like that just completely ditched because they weren't part of your central core strategy. So you definitely had a very specific vision of how to move forward. And I think actually one of the reasons that you may have lost that final PC movie match was because your Morgul Skulker came in your first hand, and so.
That was a fellowship match.
Oh, was that the fellowship match? Okay, so yeah.
But you're 100% correct on that. My opening hand had my Morgul Skulker, and I didn't mulligan. I looked back at the hand. I was like, why didn't I mulligan? And I looked at it, and I had I guess the hand looked decent enough to keep. I took the gamble. I was like, well, you know what? Hopefully I won't need the Skulker. Hopefully those Bilbos won't add up. Getting rid of my conditions, and yeah, they did.
I'm really
you can only add so many burdens.
To include just the one Skulker. You've got so much of your deck revolves around that Ring Wraith and Twilight, and it wants to be found kicking off. Was that just to keep it really tight? Is this a 30-card side? I haven't counted.
Right. All of my decks are 30-30. So the choice of going with just one Skulker, if I play multiples, I mean, as you can see what we were just discussing right here, if you draw it in your opening hand and there's really nothing to cycle back, it's pretty much a dead draw.
Yep.
So even with just the one copy and, the very low chance that I should have actually have seen it in my opening hand, the time it does, the time you do draw it, sometimes you can get lucky and get, Ring Wraith and Twilight, and then it wants to be found off at site 2, and then, boom, site 3, shuffle it right back in. I wasn't lucky enough to do that, so. What I should have done was just held on to it, and then when his Bilbo discarded my condition, I should have added it back, but hey, there's always next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a good time. So that's my choice behind the one Skulker, is because if you draw multiple copies of it in your opening hand, it's kind of a dead draw. There's only 4 Ring Wraith and Twilights, 4 to be found in the decks, and 3 to 4 helpless, depending on the format. So, there's not really too many things you're going to be shuffling back. You kind of have to just get lucky and hit a Ring Wraith and Twilight, and then it wants to be found in your opening hand. Mm-hmm. That's what you're really aiming for.
That makes sense. I hadn't seen the combination of the Red Orcs and the Twilight Nazgul. I play a lot of Twilight Nazgul myself, but I really loved watching your deck in action. So it's something I'm probably gonna take for a spin at some point here. It just looked like a ton of fun.
Right.
It's a very tight
have fun
combo
with it.
Too.
Yeah, just watch out for Son of Hamfast. Make sure you got plenty of counters for him.
I saw the 4 helplesses in there. There was one game I think where you needed them too. He kept getting them shed, and you kept dropping them back on. I'm not sure if that was a fellowship game or a movie game though.
Yeah, I think once we can get helpless into just a back row condition with an Errata, I think that card will be more suited for a movie block. That choice to go with the 4 helpless was, I was just expecting more Frodos than alternate ring bearers. So
yep,
the gamble paid off. There are a couple people running Gimli, but I expected more Frodos, more Elfmen, and it paid off.
Yeah, I think you definitely had a good read on that. Practically all of these decks kind of defaulted to that Elfman setup. So actually, speaking of, one of the questions that I wanted to bring up to everybody as they have their own chance is, what individual changes would you like to see? And I know that you have brought up with me in private chat the helpless change. So go ahead and sell us on what change you'd like to see here to helpless.
Right. Okay, helpless, since it was printed in fellowship block and corruption, I feel really wasn't given the chance it had to shine. I mean, they gave him the Nkea in movie block, but anyways, I think it could just be better suited to play spot a Nazgul, place to your back row. Sam's game tech does not apply. Simple as that.
So instead of having Sam on the table, you then play it to your support area, and it just hangs out. So that way you can get it out before Sam has to be on the table, meaning it's not a dead draw if your opponent has not yet put him down on the table.
That would be a fairly substantial buff there as well. I mean, not needing to worry about if you can't play it is big, but also the way it works currently, Sam can always use his ability the turn he's played, even if he gets helpless to the same turn. You know, some of the us can show up and remove a couple of burdens.
On the other hand, there's
And
some of
that's
these other like
that's the window. All right, go ahead.
oh, so I was gonna say on the other hand, there's some of these other specific player counters that are that flexible though. Like so, for instance, he had Too Great and Terrible in his deck, where it doesn't hurt him if Gandalf is not
I
there.
agree.
You can just use it immediately, ditch it, and it doesn't get in your way. Whereas Helpless is one of those where it's it may be crucial for you to have at the right moment, but you're not able to guess when Sam is going to come down. So you have to keep it until then, and so it kind of clogs you. Unlike Too Great and Terrible, where you can either decide, oh, they're not running Gandalf, or oh, I don't need to.
Right, you could just play it for free.
Exactly, yeah.
No, I'm absolutely not trying to say Helpless shouldn't be a candidate for Errata. Just that is kind of inherently a buff on 2 spots, not just the one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming to buff it, to bring it more into line with alternate ring bearers in expanded and movie block. I mean, I'm inherently looking to buff the card. I'm not looking to weaken it or anything. I want to buff it, to give corruption a chance to be played, because the threat of Sam coming down and just nuking 2 to 3 burdens is what kills the deck, which is why Sam was overall banned in the next format.
Mm-hmm.
We jump into what is it, multipath. Sam gets banned, and then we get Tom Bomb Battle's hat.
I don't play expanded, so I don't know what Tom Bomb Battle's hat does.
Oh no! Multipath would still be considered movie. That's what we're aiming to do for PC eventually. I had thought.
So
yeah,
take the 3
Ketura has
block sites.
Yeah, so
has a great player.
Right. I don't want to defer from the original question with Helpless. So no. I was just trying to use it to build on my point I was making. But no, my point was, I do want to buff Helpless in order to help. I'm not saying there's tons of corruption players out there, but to help corruption players, as the person who took the deck to Worlds, played 4 copies in their deck, and played it, in the very tough gauntlet of players, I think I have, at least some type of unique opportunity to speak on what I feel, what I noticed would help the overall deck actually become, meta.
Mm-hmm.
People jumping into Elf Man, it's like all of a sudden you buff Helpless. It's like, hey, corruption's starting to look really good.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that we can play around with. I want to get some candidates actually into playtesting and have people trying them out here relatively soon. So I think that's one candidate that we could definitely look at. So so that's a shadow side
raise
change.
my hand for that.
Do you have any free people sides change that you'd like to see? Either buffs or nerfs?
Something more along the lines of 2 eyes as often as I can spare them. If there's any type of culture that's missing a draw card, I mean, that thing buffed Gandalf in Fellowship block just beyond. Even in movie block, I mean, you can use that thing in Ents and other decks that just use Gandalf. But I think that card opened a lot of opportunities for deck building in general. So if there's any other type of culture draw cards that's missing, I know delving for dwarves and elves have the draw card, but I like drawing cards. I like seeing the cards that I need. So if there's something, if we can make some kind of draw card, something that can make any type of deck filtering, some type of tutor, that's just the type of player I am. So that's what I would suggest. Tutors and draw cards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's definitely something to think about. Awesome. Well, anything else you'd like to talk about before we move on to Chadwick?
No, just again, thank you for all your hard work.
Well, thank you for showing
up.
I
appreciate you. Yeah,
wouldn't have made any difference if people didn't come. So I'm glad you did, and we had a great run there.
Yeah, if there's anything I can ever do to help out, give my opinion again, just shoot me a message.
Will do.
I mean, keep playing, keep being part of the conversation around all these cards.
Yeah,
I'll definitely be around. I'll definitely be around.
Or so the more input
someone's
there is,
keep
I
the
think
game alive.
always the better we are.
Yeah.
Someone's got to keep corruption alive in this game, man.
All right, well, Chadwick, let's move
All
on
right,
to you.
fellas. Good talking. Everyone, you have a good day.
Hey,
I'll
you
see you all
too.
next time.
Thanks for showing up. All right, Chadwick, let's talk about you then. So in your run, you used Last Alliance on both sides, is that correct? On both your PC fodder and your PC movie decks. And then in fodder, you used a Nazgul beatdown versus movie your advanced besiegers. So do you want to tell us some of the thoughts going through your head as you chose those decks?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely played what I'd feel are fairly meta decks. Fellowship, I don't really know that I'd call that list like a Last Alliance deck. There was a copy in there, but for Fellowship, first let me say I think PC Fellowship is like the most fun I've had in a format. I've still been playing a ton of it even after Worlds. I just think it's in a really, really good spot right now. There's a lot of you see a lot of the same cards, but there's just so much variety in how you want to build decks. And pretty much every shadow culture has like a viable, what I would say, like top tier list that you can be playing. So loved the format. In PC Fellowship, I think the one big thing that stands out is that like you can't just dump cards into play as a Fellowship player. Like I spent so much time counting every single Twilight I was giving them and making sure that I could handle like what they were going to get with that Twilight. So I played, I mean, it's a choke deck. It's Sandros's, pretty close to Sandros's list that he's been playing in both Decipher, Fellowship of the Ring, and PC. But I just loved the list because, again, like I could go wide with companions if I needed to, or if like Aragorn and Frodo and Sam could get the job done, I could keep it really tight and not give them any Twilight. So Fellowship just had like a ton of play and really allowed me to kind of dictate how I wanted to play a particular game. So
Gotcha.
still love that list.
I must have misread this then while I was cramming here right before the session, trying to get it all in. So you're right. So this is more
Yeah.
of a play down the Frodo and Aragorn at the very beginning to do choke, and then as needed,
Yep.
drop down the other companions. And you happen to have a Last Alliance, but it's really more just about getting people's toys on them, canceling skirmishes, and deleting stuff with Secret Sentinels.
Yeah. I mean, it just has answers to everything. I mean, you bring a ton of cards on Aragorn. I don't like playing Pony because it gives all the other Last Alliance decks easy Aragorns. So by starting him and playing Green Dragon, it kind of takes away that they actually have to draw him. And, if they're not playing him till Site 2 or Site 3, you're getting more Twilight when it really matters. So
And if
the
they
Fellowship,
pick you to go first, you've still got the option of starting Sam, pulling
yeah,
Aragorn with their Green Pony.
Yeah, if they outbid me, then I would typically start Legolas and Arwen, or I could do Legolas and Sam. Kind of, I don't know that I got outbid. I'm trying to think. I don't think I got outbid, but I was usually bidding 1 to 2. And it seems like people don't bid as crazily in Fellowship as they did in movie. So the Nazgul, it kind of was a process of elimination for me on that side. I didn't want to play Moria because going into Worlds, I felt like everybody was playing Last Alliance and everybody was playing 4 Secret Sentinels. So for me, I kind of I checked off Moria, I checked off Sauron. Sauron Grind is like shadows that I didn't really feel comfortable playing. Because if they draw 2 or 3 Sentinels, it's pretty hard to win. So I was down to Uryx and Nazgul. I played around a little bit with Twilight Nazgul, regular Nazgul. I tried some Uryx, but my deck has a lot of one-ofs and on the Fellowship side, so I didn't want to play Uryx and play like 4 Abandoning Reason for Madness. I love that card when you have 2 Ranger Swords and 2 Aragorn's bows and a bunch of spare companions that are easy to pitch, but I just settled in on Nazgul, and honestly, they were okay, but they were a little underwhelming. I definitely lost a couple games towards the end where you just can't get across the finish line with killing enough companions. So they were the letdown of Fellowship for me.
It's interesting that you say that you passed up on both Moria and Sauron Grind, and those were the 2 that ended up going to the finals.
Very funny, right? Yeah, I mean, going into it, I mean, you look at like even what like Base Malus and those guys were playing. Everybody was playing Arwen Legolas start. They were playing King and Exiles with heals. They were playing a ton of Elrons and 3 to 4 Secret Sentinels. And yeah, you can beat that deck with Moria. You can sometimes beat that deck with Sauron, but I just felt like it was an uphill battle.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like the way to jump on them was potentially early, getting some Black Breath, some Blade Tips out before they could get Ethelas and Secret Sentinels and allies going, and at least try to stop them.
Mm-hmm.
So
we have a question here from chat wanting to know why you only did 2 Morgul Gates. Was there any thinking around having more or fewer of those?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for a long time, I only played 1. It's an okay card, but I mean, if you look at the list, you're playing like 4 Atea, 4 Cantea, 3 or 4 Witch Kings. It just, the math never worked out a lot of the times where it was like, oh my gosh, this Gates is going to let me play 3 Nazgul, or Gates is going to let me get out this second Nazgul. I feel like people either give you plenty of Twilight where you're getting 2 guys out comfortably, or they're choking you, and a Gates or not, you're still only getting a guy out.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I wanted 4 Black Breath. I knew I wanted 4 Blade Tip. And the other cards, so the cards that really were kind of that flex spot were the Gates, and that's where I ended up with 2 of them.
Right on. So over on your movie side, you went with the advanced Marauders, looks like, and other besiegers. Is this going off of what's his name, the guy who came in first for the PC movie championship, or how did you end up on this on the movie side?
I switched to this Shadow about 3 hours before the tournament. So up until then, I had been playing a lot more PC movie, like with some friends and things like that, like trying to figure out lists. And up until then, I was unsurprisingly like trying to find like a Threat Nazgul build I thought was decent. And I didn't think Morgul Orcs were going to be quite good enough without like a Fellowship that could draw cards. So I also felt like people were going to play a lot of Dauntless Hunter, despite the nerf to it. People just seemed to really like that deck style. And I also thought people were going to play a lot of Elves and Men. So this list does very good against both of those lists. Ithelstone is probably a little too good. There was a couple games, I remember in the group stage, I had an Ithelstone in play, and a Dauntless Hunter deck moved to site 5. I had an Ithelstone in play. I had 2 more in my hand, so I cheated 9 Twilight out on a Dauntless Hunter deck, and ended up being like 1 of each advanced guy and a troll against like a couple hobbits and a Legolas. So it just helps really get around the choke from like Dauntless Hunter. And let's be honest, Hate's just a really powerful card as well. But yeah, the Shadow, I just felt like I could hang with Gandalf and Ents. I could at least get some stops with those trolls. I know we saw the Faker, I think, kill Basmelis at site 2 at one point.
Yep. That site 2
I never had
slam.
Yeah. I never quite had that, but it just it had a lot of versatility. You can go wide with it with the orcs. You can play beatdown by just, orc troll. Ithelstone kind of helped draw cards. I hate having decks that are 34 or 35 cards in movie. But without Glorfindel, like you're kind of forced to play Arwen's weapons, and it bumped the deck size up. So honestly, it was obviously like the last side of a deck I chose between Fellowship and movie, and it was also by far the best quarter or half of a deck that I had. So I think the list is incredibly good and incredibly versatile.
Right on. Well, so let's
you
talk
said something
about...
there that I'd love to ask a question on. You said without Glorfindel, you have to play Arwen's weapons. I know Glorfindel recently got the nerf. It's no longer a cheap starting companion. Have you played around with using Glorfindel either as a solo starter or just as a splash in the deck? I see you've got several other splash companions in here.
Yeah, certainly not as a solo starter. I mean, Legolas is is too good not to start. I did actually have Glorfindel as a splash companion up until a couple days before the tournament, and then I ended up dropping him for Dervorin to help discard some bigger minions. Felt like Easterlings were going to be popular, and things like that, and being able to just like discard their biggest guy really helps you double. So I switched him out for Dervorin, and Dervorin was decent for me. So I think Glorfindel's still a good splash companion, but I ended up wanting the Gondor guy and him more than I needed just like a bigger body.
That makes sense.
So, and Elves and Men was great. I mean, I play Elves and Men a lot. I played it in the last Worlds I played in 2004. I played essentially the same list, so I'm very familiar with it. I know what it can and can't do, so it was just more of a being really comfortable with the list. If I was gonna play what I felt was the best Fellowship in the format, I probably would have played the Gandalf Ent list. But it just isn't my style, and I hadn't logged the games with it, so I just stuck with what I knew.
Right on. And yeah, Elfmen was very popular at this particular event. Lots of decks going that direction. Kind of interesting how you talked about Dauntless Hunter, expecting to have that show up a lot, and I think it only was in one deck. I think everybody was shifting around and trying to get in this Mexican standoff with everyone, trying to figure out what's going to be popular, what's going to be good. So it's always interesting to see those meta guesses and where they end up.
I'm trying to remember. Did we see a Dauntless Hunter in
I believe
top 8?
Skilled actually had one.
Yeah, I actually.
And he got knocked
So
out
my
first round.
deck list definitely
Oh,
paid off. I played
you are correct.
Skilled in the top 8, the first round of the top 8. Obviously in movie, and yeah, the orcs did exactly what they needed to do there, and I think he made it till site 7 at that point. But yeah, it's really hard for them to play around Ithelstone.
Mm-hmm.
And then also just the fact that my hates still cost 0 against Dauntless Hunter now.
Oh yeah. So they're with the Dauntless Hunter change, they are no longer needing to pay up front. So if there's no Twilight in the pool, you can play as many hates as you need to.
Yep.
Even if there is Twilight in the pool, you just slowly lose it after the fact.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't have any skirmish pumps or anything that I need to save Twilight for, so it's really just kind of mathing out using your Twilight, and then you get hates for free and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, so let's hear about your soapbox if you have any. What kind of errata would you like to see? What kind of changes would you like to see to some Shadow and some Free People's cards?
Yeah, like I said, I think PC Fellowship is in just an outstanding spot right now. I really, really like the format.
It's definitely more versatile than the more varied than the PC Movie is, because I think with PC Movie we've errated a lot of things, but not everything, and so certain strategies that exist are the ones that just haven't had their kneecaps knocked out from underneath them yet. So honestly, that's the direction I want to go in, is to give them the same treatment. Hit Ents, hit Elves and Men. Try to see if we can get those knocked down to the same level that the other ones are at, so that there's no main strategy anymore that has not been touched, at least in some manner. But anyway, these were your thoughts.
No, that's okay. As an Elves and Men player, I hate saying it, but I think it's time to do something with Elrond and probably Secret Sentinels.
Both of those definitely had a huge showing at this particular event. Elrond, Herald of Gil-galad, and Secret Sentinels. We did affect Mavilia, but I think it was kneecapped a little bit by my last-minute change to it. It did alter the way that it's used, but did not actually, I think, meaningfully alter how frequently it was relied upon.
Yeah. I mean, it just across both formats, I mean, I think if you take Elrond out, it fundamentally changes how you have to build Elves and Men in movie block, or just makes it play a little bit more fair. But just the fact that he's sitting there healing, he's keeping Sorry. Keeping Legolas healed. 1 second. Sorry.
No, you're totally fine. Yeah, I think Elrond is maybe a little too pervasive. I'm never sure that he's too good, but he's such an easy slot in that you see him in almost every deck these days.
Yeah, he's
The
gotten.
fact that Vilya and Secret Sentinels then can trigger if you're running Elrond, make him that much stronger.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's I think the fact that he self heals and then all these things require exertions is really his own ability requires exertions. Secret Sentinels and Vilya require, or base Vilya at least requires exertions, and then he just heals himself back up. So he's a one card army that's able to handle any of those splash elf things that you'd like to do. Not to mention that he of course bumps up Last Alliance just by being on the table. He's probably the linchpin here, and would be a good candidate to try and see how we can rework him.
Yeah, I think kind of the what he does is really wonderfully thematic. He's just a little too good at it. That makes him kind of show up in places that maybe he shouldn't be. I don't know if the right answer is to have him heal less or exert more or cost. I don't have the right answer off the top of my head, but I don't want to see him lose the identity of being this healer that heals himself and does stuff. I just think he needs to have a lever pulled somewhere to make him a little less good at it.
For sure. Maybe something that requires a little more of an elven investment. Maybe do something like to heal he actually has to exert and discard like an elven card or something. Make it so he's less of a splash if you're really going to invest in him. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look at even Basmelis played 1 and the Gandalf tutor card in his end deck. Like if that doesn't,
I could see him just costing something. Exert him twice and add 3. Keep his identity there, but make it harder for him to just kind of let you keep going. Healing, in my mind, healing almost should be something you pause for. And the fact that he can do it just to let you run that much more efficiently.
Yeah, I wonder if we could reverse the abilities here. Make him heal during the regroup phase and make him heal during the fellowship phase. I wonder if
I could see that. I could even see his ability to exert to heal being shifted to something like a response to when you reconcile. So it's when you're stopping he does his thing. There's tons of ways that you can kind of play with this.
Which King in the chat suggests
spitballing. I'm not trying to say I've got the right answer.
Oh yeah, no. Which King in the chat says maybe if he heals himself only once, or perhaps heal 2 elven allies whose home side are 3, something like that. Yeah, like that
was my idea.
Yeah, there's all kinds of angles to take with him. Some more involved than others, but I think you've hit the nail on the head that he's probably a linchpin to some of these decks, and just a little bit too utilized. So what about the shadow side? Anything on the shadow side that you'd like to see altered, especially in PC Movie?
I have a list of things in there, but I think we've talked about those in the Discord. I think we butted heads on those quite a few times. I think it's just incredibly narrow in Movie right now for shadow sides. I think it's in an incredibly narrow format.
So which shadows would you like to see buffed then, that are not in a good spot?
Well, I mean, I hate to say it, but I love playing Corsairs. And I have tried my darndest to make them competitive, and they're not there.
So is that even after? So we did go back and fix some of the errata that we had done. Both Castamere and Corsair War Galley have received 2 rounds of errata to kind of walk back some of the changes a little bit. Corsair War Galley, in fact, I think it might have been almost, but not entirely, reverted.
Yeah, it's just unique now.
Oh yeah, that's right. And then
the big one, honestly, is still Castamere. The fact that you're paying 7 Twilight for a dude that is gonna 9 times out of 10 deal 1 wound to somebody, there's no value there. I get that when he was unerrated, that he, with a Raider Halberd or whatever, was a 22 fierce that took out 2 guys at site 2.
Yeah.
But he's just not. He's just that's their payoff card, and he's just not. He's not a threat anymore, I guess.
Remind me what the Decipher version is here. I know it's fierce. Is it?
It's both fierce and enduring, and so when you combine him with Raider Halberd that allows him to exert freely and get himself all the way exhausted, that puts him at 22 fierce.
He already has an ability to exert freely, though. No.
You have to
He can
exert
exert,
Castamere and play a Corsair. So if you don't have
so if
any
you don't have the
Twilight,
Twilight or
yeah.
you don't have the Corsair in your hand,
whereas
I remember back in the day him being a terror, but I never played Easterlings, and I couldn't recall exactly what the change was.
I wonder if it might be. I wonder if it might make sense to tie the fierceness or the enduring or both to what region the Fellowship is in, to kind of more directly address the fact that the real problem with him is when you drop him on Site 2, and so maybe make it so that it only one or both of those keywords is only in play when you are in Region 2 or Region 3. I wonder if that would be a more concise,
He can
precise
still
way.
jump up to 20 something with the Halberd, right? The problem is that he's not fierce, so if they aren't being overwhelmed, he only takes the 1 wound.
Yeah, correct.
Would something like giving him damage +1 instead of fierce help alleviate that? You know, it gives him the 2nd wound, which he would have gotten anyway if he was just winning the skirmish normally, but doesn't murder 2 companions if he is doing the overwhelm. I'm just kind of finding that middle ground. You know, if previously he ate 2 companions or dealt 2 wounds, and right now he's eating 1 companion or dealing 1 wound, that maybe there's a lever where there's somewhere in the middle there that makes him kind of feel a bit better without being oppressive.
Yeah, my thought, honestly, I don't know. I mean, thematically, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but just don't let him bear weapons.
Or just don't. Yeah, people. So
you know what I mean.
And maybe it's time for me to walk my opinion back on this. But as pointed out by Witch King in the chat, the real problem here is the interaction between Castamere and the Raider Halberd, because having a free to exert ability on an enduring companion or on an enduring minion is really the thing that pushes him into the stratosphere. And my thinking has always been that surely it's not impossible to balance a weapon that is in the same culture, even if it's not the same subculture. And if we can't handle that, then maybe we need to level up a bit. But
well, I wonder if Raider Halberd, if that's more of the problem. Perhaps it shouldn't be able to play on a on a minion that's enduring.
And that's
still have a lot of leeway, because is it the Mumakil that lets them become enduring? So you could play it, use its ability, and make somebody enduring after. Oh no, it's a skirmish event. It's not a shadow event.
Yeah, I think Castamere without the Halberd is fine. I mean, if you're gonna exert him 2 or 3 times in the shadow phase to play other Corsairs out, I mean, you open yourself up to Greenleaf, you open yourself up to Citadel of the Stars, like you open yourself up to like any maneuver wounding. But with the Halberd, obviously,
at that point, your opponent's flooded the pool. They've got to be expecting something big.
Yeah, and that's just it. It's like if they're going to flood the pool and you get to play a Castamere and exert him 3 times to play other guys out, like you flooded the pool. Like that was your choice, right? But the fact that you can keep it tight, give them 9 and still face a 22 fierce that also adds 6 more Twilight is probably the problem child there.
Kind of shocks me that Halberd is free.
Yeah, well, this is from set 7, and I think the thinking at the time, at least, was just, well, anything that requires you to have additional costs, like in this case an exertion, typically doesn't have a cost, and then on top of that, if you have something that is adding Twilight, they tend to not have a cost, because otherwise then you've got to go into the calculus of, well, I have to pay 1 up front, but I'm getting 2, so the first time I invoke it is really just kind of paying off itself kind of thing. So I can see why they ended up in that position. And the only reason that it even got ridiculous is because Enduring got released later as a keyword, which did not at the time that this was there.
Oh, Enduring didn't exist when Raider Halberd came out.
Right.
I had not realized that. Sorry, I did play through all of this, but it's been so long ago, I don't remember what cards were part of which era.
Right. Okay,
So
well that's definitely something for us to tinker with further then, because yeah, you're right. Corsairs didn't make any kind of showing anywhere around here, in spite of the fact that Galadriel Lady Redeemed has been nerfed and is no longer so much of a menace against some of the things that Corsair needs to bring to the table. So yeah, okay. We can definitely look at Corsairs and try to pump them back up. Not as high maybe as they used to be, but at least so that they're viable. Because you're right, things have narrowed a little too much in PC Movie, so we need to try and make things a little more even.
yeah, and I think if you do something with Elrond and Secret Sentinels, it brings back more things too, like Ninja Golem's probably a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Right now it's Elrond with his ring never lets you have a promise keeping in play, so hard to win without the
I don't. I'm just gonna put it out there. I don't think Ninja Golem's gonna be competitive until we do something about sleep.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah,
so long as sleep is ever in the back pocket somewhere.
There are shadows that want one or two conditions, and sleep's a problem. But Golem has so many to get properly set up so he can do his thing, and being able to wipe turns of setup off the board with 3 shadow and exertion is.
And not even that.
I really like playing Ninja Golem.
One...
I think it's a ton of fun, but it loses to that matchup with no real contest.
And even if whoops, wrong thing. Even if Ninja Golem were to get a toehold, what's that one Golem card that allows you to just completely completely wipe? What is it?
Oh, you don't even need a spot Smeagol. You just discard any number of
number of Golem cards. Like the fact that exists, and so if Ninja Golem were to ever go to too much prevalence, people could just start splashing that and just nuke him down with practically a custom made.
Honestly, though, that card just needs to have Spot Smeagol added to it.
True.
Like I don't think it's too good if you're building a Smeagol deck to say, yeah, sometimes Smeagol just trashes on Golem. Mm-hmm. It's that it could be splashed is the problem.
Yeah.
And maybe it should have a limit to like up to 3.
And that's another thing too that is kind of more of a general rework that I want to do at some point. Between Sleep Caradhras and Saruman's Power and what are the other ones? We have a couple of the Gandalf ones that are just based on... What was that?
Grown Suddenly Tall.
Grown Suddenly Tall. There's the Darkness one with the adding spawning 4 Twilight tokens and discarding all shadow conditions. Yeah, there's all sorts of these just board wipe nukes that exist. And because the nukes exist, they are the best option, right? Like and even Secret Sentinels allows you to discard 2, which is more than the vast majority of condition removal out there. So it seems to me that there needs to be a reining in of some of the on the high end.
Secret Sentinels, I don't think is such a problem. I mean, like it's pervasive because Elrond's pervasive, but it only discards 2 if you spot an orc, which sure is common, but is definitely not everywhere. And if Elrond's not in every deck, it's now a kind of a niche card, right? Mm-hmm. I would really love to see the full wipes, the Sleep Caradhras and Saruman's Power, be reworked to discard all of your conditions. Your opponent has to discard that many plus 1 conditions.
Yeah, something like that, or even just discard X of your own conditions and make them discard X plus 1. Yeah, something.
Sure, yeah. You can,
but yeah, something that is more of a self-sacrificing, like yeah.
Right. I run Sleep. I think 3 copies in both my movie and Fellowship Pipeweed deck because I don't run any Fellowship conditions.
And yeah, that's the other thing too.
It's just a free. I get to wipe your play.
Yeah, they're balanced around the fact that it's going to affect both your opponent and your support area. But if you have built your deck in a way that your support area doesn't have any conditions, then yeah, you have completely negated that part of the cost. Now, you are also avoiding all of those cards being in your deck, which, that you could see that as a particular cost. But from a moment to moment gameplay standpoint, you haven't paid anything to take that to have that ability in your back pocket. So
Yeah. Now, if sleep were to get adjusted in that way, and the other one that wipes only shadow conditions and grown suddenly tall that doesn't require, if they were all to be adjusted kind of in a similar way, I do think we'd need to consider Gandalf culture getting something that lets him do condition removal more directed.
deep in thought.
Even if it's a
So
what's the one where he can discard a possession? Where he targets a single thing. I don't think Gandalf should lose the ability to get rid of targeted conditions, but I do think that those blanket wipe all of them need to be reined in.
Yeah, roll of thunder.
And Saruman's power too. It's less of a pervasive problem because you can't just you can, but you are less likely to see a single minion splash for that.
Yeah, and this is actually so one of the things that I have been poking at, and that I think might come into play around V3, because we're in the middle of getting V2 coded and off the ground and into playtesting, is I would like to add a mechanic that involves temporarily halting conditions rather than permanently discarding them off the table. Internally, I've been referring to it as silence. Where you would have Gandalf come in and silence, like if you were to come in and silence all of the conditions on the table, where you flip them face down and they're not going to do anything until next turn, that could, but then they come back as soon as the turn is over. That sort of temporary wide wipe might make a lot more sense and be a lot more fair.
If Sleep said, I'm going to double jump against you without your conditions affecting me, but not you have no conditions for the rest of the game unless you draw them and pay for them again, it'd be a huge difference.
Yeah. And so I would love to have that ability to say that, to diversify how condition handling is made, where some people are able to temporarily deal with conditions, where other people are able to permanently deal with conditions, and then also really kind of reconfigure how what kinds of things the different cultures are allowed to target. Because right now it's dominated by cards that are able to discard any condition, which of course is the most flexible, and why wouldn't you bring that in? But I think that there should be some more cultural lines among things, like maybe make it so that elves are able to affect conditions that are attached to people, but they are garbage at affecting support area conditions. Something like that, to really divide it up and make it so that there's almost nobody, maybe Gandalf being the sole exception, that is able to affect just any condition anywhere.
I do think you need to be careful about having cards that are too likely to not work in a matchup. Saying elves are really good at discarding conditions on companions, like in Fellowship, sure, that's amazing. You get your Black Breaths, but there's a lot of conditions, a lot of shadows that just won't do anything with. They'll be dead cards.
And that's
one that I really like. I'm working on a deck right now. It's not working yet, but it has an initiative mechanic in it, and I'm really enjoying brooding on tomorrow because I get to discard a condition every turn, but I don't pick which one it is. It makes my opponent discard a condition, which I think is a really nice way of looking at some of those, because it's clearing the field down a bit. And if my opponent's running, that one key condition somewhere, it's gonna get it. But it also gives them a lot of leeway of, in a condition-heavy deck, it's not necessarily kind of crippling their strategy, it's just slowing them down.
Yeah.
I played against Red Orc Grind yesterday with it, and it was a huge help. Every turn I got rid of Under the Watching Eye or an Orc Bowman, but I couldn't choose what I was ditching. My opponent got those choices along the way, and I thought that was a really nice interaction. I think it helped me a lot, and I think it didn't feel bad for them.
And that
especially because they beat me.
Yeah. Well, so that is actually a great way of looking at the sorts of restrictions that ought to exist. Make it so that if there is, any wild card condition removal, make it conditional like this, to where your opponent is the one that does it, or have some other kind of restriction, like, we're just silencing it, not discarding it. Something like that, to make it so that fully general condition removal is no longer a thing, and make I guess I'm not doing a good job of articulating myself here, but having differentiation between how conditions are to be dealt with, I think would improve the variety a little bit if there's no longer these winners that always are the best because they discard every condition everywhere and there's no limitations on what it could possibly be.
Right. No, I think that's true. I think it's easy to do a fallback too. You know, you're talking about elves being able to discard conditions on people. It'd be really easy to have a card that, you know, whatever the cost is, discard 2 conditions attached to your companions,
Mm-hmm.
or make the shadow player choose and discard 1 shadow condition.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really good against that Black Breath. You know, you're like, no, I'm elves. I'm healing this up. It's not a concern. Nazgul don't scare me. But you're not dead cards in most other decks. They're just not nearly as useful.
Yeah, and
I think
that's a good point too. Is having that flexibility. Those sorts of options would be good.
I do think you guys would run into issues, though. I mean, a lot of what keeps some of these heavy condition checks or decks in check is the fact that there is always a threat of somebody wiping a sizable portion of them. Think about Moria, where, I mean, Moria, if you don't check their conditions, you're going to die. Sauron Grind, you're going to die. Ninja Golem, like, what keeps these decks in check right now are the fact that there are these potential nukes that wipe them out. And if you're only delaying them or things like that, I think they're going to run rampant.
So that actually, this
you do need to be
situation
aware
that
of
the
that.
Decipher got themselves into, where they made that the thing that was holding Moria, in check, is the fact that you do have this board wipe nuke. I think that was the wrong choice to make because it resulted in the situation where we're playing rocket tag, where you either I nuke your support area or you overwhelm me with this, and they kind of leaned on that when they were making new cards and saying, well, okay, we can always rely on the fact that sleep is just going to take care of us if we design something that's too out there. My philosophy, though, is that we've got errata. Like, if there's a particular deck that is coming up that is playing too many conditions, maybe some of them need to have their costs increased. Like, we can address those situations without needing to rely on the crutch of, well, the nuke is the only thing that we've got, so it's the only tool anybody's ever going to use. I do think that at some point we need to pull the nukes out for that reason, so that those, let those condition shadows have their day, and then start figuring out which of the conditions need to be recosted because they're coming out too easily and too quickly. If I'm paying 5 Twilight for a condition, that means I'm not playing a minion, meaning I'm not threatening you in a particular way, which gives my deck a weakness that you can exploit. So I think that I definitely understand where you're coming from, but I think that was just kind of a domino effect of how Decipher balanced the game, and it's following a restriction that we're not held by because of the fact that we have access to errata.
I think there's also some real options in there that aren't get rid of everything, but still solve that problem. You know, if you turn Sleep Cadres into both players discard all but 2 conditions, then yeah, you're not going to get rid of everything that is the linchpin. You know, your opponent's stacked Goblin Swarm stays out, but they don't have 4 armories anymore. If you turn it into something that silences everything for a turn, that stacked swarm does nothing as you walk to Site 9.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you have some that target, like, I think having a variety of them in there, because I agree, it's important to have something that goes, my opponent's planning to play 20 conditions in a 30-card deck. I need to be able to get rid of more than 1.
Right.
But if you design those with a balancing act, where the card that gets rid of all but 3 really isn't very good against your opponent who's only running 2 key conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But really, kind of continues to keep Orc Grind in check, for example. And obviously, any change here needs to be played with a lot to really get a feel for, did it do its job?
And to be clear, I do think that these changes are going to be chaotic, and it's going to result in people saying, well, okay, then I'm going to go play Ninja Golem. I'm going to go play Grind. I'm going to go bring in these super condition-heavy decks, and maybe they will be on top for a little bit until we get it under control. But that kind of seesaw, chaotic. The meta has changed, and now because of these changes, different decks are able to flourish. That's honestly the kind of ecosystem that I would like to see the PC formats going through, where the game this year is not precisely the same as the game was last year. So the people that have their fingers on the pulse and are able to read the room are able to exploit those weaknesses. So that next year in the World Championship things look very, very different, and the people who are able to figure out what the actual best situational deck is going to be are the ones that succeed.
I think a lot of those instant on top decks that you're going to see too don't actually need to be tweaked at that point. If we make conditions removal kind of weaker, and suddenly Ninja Golem and Orc Grind is everywhere, I don't think that's a statement that those are now the best decks.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just those are the ones that most obviously got to come out of the shadows.
And that happened a lot with after the V1 changes. We saw tons and tons and tons of Nazgul, largely because Isengard had been nerfed with Keeper of Isengard and Savagery both getting hit in the knees, and in fact, I think that they did not make a showing hardly at all here at the World Championship, so they might need a little bit of a boost even. But it was very much a reaction to, hey, we have all these new toys that we didn't have before. Things like even all the tentacle decks that were coming out of the woodwork for a little bit. Tentacles didn't go anywhere, but people were still trying them because, hey, now there's new tools, there's new things for us to do. And so I think that that is going to be an effect of any major errata or major V card release, where people are going to be trying stuff out, and it can be tricky to not overcorrect on that and say, well, oh no, everyone's using a tentacle deck, I guess it needs nerfed. Well, no, it didn't. It's just people want to try it.
Yeah, and I don't want to change the subject, but I do have to jet here in a few minutes. So I just wanted to give I think a lot of these ideas are good ideas that are worth exploring, and I think they're gonna take a long time to potentially flesh out. But looking at, I just had a quick list, and maybe you guys can talk about them, or
sure.
I'll just talk to deaf ears. But
Sure.
For movie, I just have a few more that I wrote down, and a lot of these were the recent changes. I think the Enquea, Thrall of the One, or Thrall to the One, whatever it is, I think that change was unnecessary. The deck was not very popular to begin with, nor was it what I would call tier 1. And I think that change could be reverted, and that deck still probably wouldn't see a ton of play. So I wrote that one down. I'm just trying to give people more options. I think that deck was a deck that was a fringe playable for a while. And now with that change, it's basically unplayable. Along with that, and maybe when you guys are to me, I think Dauntless Hunter is unplayable again. With Hunter, the big thing was knowing how your skirmishes were going to go. They have no Twilight. They're not doing anything. And now, like I said, oh, my guy just got hated. Oh, you get to play your burn every village out of Dunland. Oh, you get to do this. That big surprise is gone. I'm just trying to, again, give people more tier 1 options, or close to tier 1 options. We talked about Castamere. I'm going to leave my plug with one other card for movie. And I know that we fought about this one a long time. I think we have over-nerfed elf event decks into the ground. Kirdan, Glimpse of Fate, Galadriel, the changes to all the events, like Curse Their Fall Feet and stuff. To me, and I know it's an unpopular opinion, I think taking Galadriel and changing her how you did has killed elf decks, like pure elf decks. And I think the old Errata was plenty. I mean, I'm talking about Lady Redeemed, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
Can I interrupt you for just a moment here, Chadwick?
Yep.
We've got somebody else who's joined the chat here, which I think is awesome, but I'm getting a ton of background noise. I don't know if it's coming through on the Twitch stream, but Ketura, do you have the ability to mute?
I did on my side. You can right click and you can mute them.
Does that mean they're no longer coming through the Twitch?
I did it on my end, so yeah, it's not coming through on the Twitch side.
Okay, that's all I was worried about, was that everybody was getting
the
excess noise.
Sorry, I took care of that.
Thank you.
Sorry to whoever you are, but yeah, your mic's going crazy.
So I don't know. Again, these are, I know we're trying to change formats for a lot, and I know that Galadriel is one of those the field down, and the old one where you could start her for free, um, and then discard a card at the start of the regroup phase. Trust me, I played her a lot. You have a 3 strength companion. She's getting rid of one thing a turn if you don't use an elf event. And you're giving them a Twilight every single time you move. Like, she was a balanced card, in my opinion. That was it for movie, other than I had jotted down Elrond and Secret Sentinels as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Secret Sentinels, again, until you make some sweeping changes with the big condition removal, Fellowship phase was an idea that I had, putting Secret Sentinels in Fellowship phase. It does cost 2 Twilight, but oftentimes 2 Twilight doesn't matter in the maneuver phase. And it's like, oh, I just got these awesome shadow conditions out. I'm going to use them in the skirmish phase. Oh, well, actually, I'm going to blow up those 2 Orc Bowmen that you just played, or I'm going to blow up these 2 awesome conditions you just played. The timing of that event is also, I think, what makes it good.
I think that's really true. Any maneuver phase removal generally works before it's ever taken effect. It's kind of like what I was saying, where I'm nervous about making Helpless a support area condition, because I think that Sam should do something when he shows up. It being a Fellowship phase event, or even a regroup event, let them work for the one turn kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Potentially adjust the power level of that card in a way that's not. It's still good at sniping the key thing, but it's not quite as frustrating for the shadow player.
And that was the exact thinking behind the shoulder to shoulder change, moving it to the Fellowship phase so that the Twilight that you were dropping on the table was now available to be used. Whereas dropping it in the maneuver phase, while it wasn't free, for many cases it was not actually usable. So not really.
If you move Secret Sentinels to regroup, you'd still be able to keep the orc spotting requirement, but it would give an interesting potential challenge where you don't want to kill all the orcs.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
your
also going to
opponent
just
drops
say,
their 2 runners to cycle their hand, and you need to let one of them beat on Frodo a little bit.
That would be interesting. What were you saying, Chadwick?
I was just going to say the other idea I had. I mean, if you feel like because it's such a good card that it's in the maneuver phase, like exert an elf ally to discard the condition in the maneuver phase is probably fine. But then maybe say you can spot an orc and exert a different elf ally to discard the second one.
Mm-hmm. I really like that. Whether it stays maneuver or not, I think tying the orc spot to a second ally would really help with the Elrond splash.
It so that it doesn't work with Elrond anymore, the splash Elrond.
Yep.
Which, yeah.
So maybe you leave Elrond alone and train Sentinels and Vilya back or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of places to kind of touch on here, and I think it's really almost dangerous to try to do those changes too quickly, because if you make a change and you go, oh, that may have been an overcorrection, or that didn't quite solve what I wanted, but you also haven't let the meta figure it out.
Yeah, that's always the rough part, is trying to get that balance between letting people have enough time, because again, this is a game that people play for fun, but yeah,
because we're talking about
we can take an infinite amount of time if we don't actually move, so it's kind of, I'm not quite sure what the answer to that is. Maybe we just need to have some sort of like scheduled, like, okay, we're going to make changes twice a year kind of thing.
So Tuna and I were actually chatting about that for this coming year. I know we're not exclusively the ones doing any errata work, but we were discussing trying to put together a very clear schedule for people to be able to be aware of, where we would come out probably in January, assuming I find the time to finish my script that looks at the cards the way we're trying to look at them, and say, these are the cards we think we want to look at. Open up conversation. And then kind of February or March, rolled out changes. And then nothing else for 6 months, at which point we say, these are the cards we think we want to look at.
Yeah. And and then in between, make sure that we're doing playtesting that's, obviously
Right.
in the playtest formats, anything goes, and we could shift things as we needed to. But
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with us undoing something we've done. We're gonna make mistakes. None of us are professional game designers.
mhm.
But giving it a set period of time for discussion ahead of time, because the players, I think it's pretty obvious from this World Championship, the people who are putting in the time and effort for this errata stuff, we're not the best players.
Mhm.
None of us made it to the top 8. So getting input from those people who are, but also just from the community at large, I think is really, really valuable.
Mhm.
And then giving everything time to kind of sit. Because maybe a change goes through and it looks like it's going to be huge right away, but people will figure out how to deal with it. And maybe nobody figures out how to deal with it, and we go, we made a mistake. We need to go back on some of this.
Yeah.
So, well, I got to bounce, guys. Before I jump off, Ketura, I just want to say thanks for everything that you do for the community and the other PC members. I've been playing for about a year again, and I've been having an absolute blast with it. So thank you for taking the time and using your free time to let everybody play the game that they love. So thank you.
Right on. Thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. There are things about this game that you don't see in any other games, and it's always seemed like it would be a shame if it were to just slowly die the slow death. So I'm happy to do it. Well, thanks for joining us. And it looks like basmelis, you're on. Maybe it was your mic that was freaking out. Sorry about the mute, but
yes, I waited until Chadwick was finished talking, but I'm glad to be here.
Right on. Well, thanks for joining us, Chadwick. And so let's take a look at basmelis, the world champion. So we talked a little bit at the end of the last, right at the end of the world championship. You ducked into the stream, and we got to hear your thoughts a little bit. But now you've had some time, so let's just kind of go over your decks and stuff. So can you tell us a little bit about the decks that you chose and why, the decisions that were going through your head as you picked your choices?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to start at the World Championship top 8 decks or even earlier?
Yeah, if you've got the we can take a look at your
all the time this evening, so I have no rush to be anywhere. If anyone else jumps in to have a discussion, I'll be here in the background, so that's not a problem.
Right on. Yeah, we can. We can start with the group stage. That's probably a good.
Yeah. Well, before the group stage, I started the site up again in last summer because my wife and I played. Well, I have some cubes, like I've told you before, and we played some of them, and. I thought, well, what's if the site is even online at all? So I went in and well, I got my password back thanks to you. And I noticed that there was a PC format, so a new format, and that there would be a World Championship, which got me instantly excited to well play the new formats and see how this World Champion would work out. It has been a lot of fun. Me and my wife, my wife is Olga 06, F06. She lost almost everything, but she still has fun participating.
As long as you have fun playing the game.
Yeah. Well, we have fun playing the game with each other, and well, thanks to this whole World Championship, even more players, more friends of us are starting to learn the game and entering the game website.
And that makes me happy to hear. That's something that I've had my eye on for a long time, is trying to be able to branch out and start increasing the player count. There's a lot of things that still need to be done, but it's good to hear that the World Championship helped in that way.
Yeah, it's the PC format got me hooked because I used to play a lot long time ago, and a new format was instantly exciting. So I started out with the PC Fellowship format, and discovered quickly that well, my that Gandalf was quite unplayable. Since I only encountered Nazgul decks that played well
Too
up
great and
to a
terrible all
4.
the time.
So and I used to play a lot of Gandalf Moria decks, which were my favorite. Well, you destroyed Elrond, and well, in my view, you destroyed the Gandalf strategy. No, not really, but most players played the Nazgul deck, so I thought it was unplayable. So I was trying to find a deck that would fit, but also not play Nazgul myself, because I'm not really a big fan of the strategy. So I looked at Isengard first, which has which has Saruman and a weaker Saruman and a weaker Savagery. And I still played the normal numbers of it. And the Fellowship was a quite standard Elven Gondor themed deck. Though a few changes that were quite interesting were, of course, Sam. Not being able to remove burdens as easily with Sam also made a lot of difference. Glariel was a bit different, not too much, but being able to walk to a site, see what they're playing, and then switch it to a forest that was quite funny, I thought. And I'm not sure if that was a design mistake or intended, but if I would have Glariel on turn 1 and move to site 2 and see if they're playing Nazgul or not, that made a lot of difference.
That's not necessarily a ramification that I had thought about. In reality, her change to the way that her site works to her site ability works was predominantly for expanded, just trying to make sure that she couldn't drop down forest sites willy nilly on the shadow site path. But
that makes sense.
I didn't realize that she was changed.
In my experience, she just you get to see the next site before you get to change it. So I think that's an oversight, but that is valuable. That is valuable information to have.
I mean, that's interesting. I haven't seen it used like that, but that would totally work. You could see that Ford of Brunnen is coming up and replace it with your Forest, Sanctuary 3 if you have one, if there is one.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I played first in the deck. I even played the Anduin Wilderland, which is not the best one for my deck, but it's better than losing all your allies.
I do the same thing.
Now that, I believe, was actually one of the originally intended uses of that Galadriel, was being able to avoid Anduin Confluence while also making it so now you were stuck skipping the archery phase, which of course is an upside to most elf decks, because this is the only Forest Site 7. But that's also an interesting use of it to avoid the Fort of Brunnen here with the not quite useless but essentially not usable, waterfall movement bonus.
I've used it more than you can think of, I think.
Well, maybe I'm wrong on that then. Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I use it regularly when people say, "Well, I don't want to move to the bridge," and then maybe the Balrog comes, and then let's go to site 6. It's quite cool. The other change, Flaming Brand, is quite a cool card. Now it can be worn by Arwen. I love that change. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was.
I really like to change the Flaming Brand.
Yeah,
it can go on Arwen, but it also costs a point, so it's no longer just that free thing to toss in, and it's discard against Nazgul to make it super good. All around, I think it's some really nice changes.
It makes a bit more sense.
Great upon, but I love this update.
Yeah, I love this card now. So this is a great card, which is incidentally great for the Nazgul decks, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But still, now everybody's playing 4 of them. But all right. This version of the deck had some anti-Nazgul tech with Atlas. I really like Boromir, Lord of Gondor against Nazgul decks. He can't get overwhelmed, so try to play Boromir and an armor on it, then he's almost unkillable.
Mm-hmm.
and the rest is it's quite
Yeah,
it
and then
seems
healing in return with King in Exile and Thelis. Yeah, that's a pretty.
Yeah, make sure you can remove that blade tip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, also one change that I made for this was in the group stage. I used to start with Arwen and Legolas, but I really wanted to start with. I really wanted to go first in this format, so I started bidding free and starting Arwen with Sam. So there's nothing else for Legolas to do. Legolas is also a liability against the Nazgul, in my opinion, because they play the relentless charge, I think.
Yeah.
To
Yep.
wound
Wounds all the archers.
I also, if I get the chance, I'll discard Argon's bow against Nazgul because it's just a liability.
Mm-hmm.
Now you run a single copy of Aragorn, so I think there was a mistake in one game during the actual Final 8 table, but you normally would start him if you didn't have Prancing Pony, right?
Yeah, that's true, but this is a different deck.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is the group stage.
Yeah.
I switched, in the group stages and also in the tournament championships. I played this deck. I think the first tournament championship I split with the Staley, and the second one I won, and the third one the group stage went fine. I went 3-1. And I actually lost to Skild's deck, to his Aragorn, Bilbo, and Moria deck, and I thought this was a quite impressive deck, so I thought I'd just play that instead. But in hindsight, I thought that this deck would have been a better fit because I played against two Gandalf decks, which are quite good against. With Sleep Rafters is quite a good card against Moria.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also I played against the Sauron deck, and also I think this deck is better suited against the Sauron deck than the other side.
So you ended up switching to more of the choky style rather than the healing style, and then Moria, like you said.
Yeah. This is the deck from the which I won the most games with because I I lost the second. I think I won 4 games in a row with this one.
3 games in a row, and then essentially 4 games in a row. Yeah, you're right, because you had the final win in the best of 3.
Yeah, and in the finals I did make a big mistake by not starting Aragorn because I was apparently asleep.
You played a lot of games back to back.
I didn't see the Prancing Pony, and I saw my mistake after I got my starting hand, and I thought, let's mulligan into Aragorn, and it didn't happen, but it was quite an interesting game because of that mistake.
So, to those who didn't see come on, where's the image? Stupid thing.
The Faker had it in his deck, so I think we can see there.
Yeah, well, the links don't work on the for V cards on the forum. It's one of the downsides of it.
I'm also noticing here
with the tan color, kind of fooled Basmelis a little bit, because there is a version of the Prancing Pony that is the promo version is also kind of gold and brown. And honestly, this was actually something I saw a lot of people doing. There were lots of people that were swapping out cards for promo versions and alternate arts, I think intentionally trying to confuse their opponents for just this reason, to try and make sure that the glance value wasn't as useful. And so Basmelis kind of got caught by it, thinking that this Prancing Pony had been played when in fact it was the V1 Site 1.
That continues to be my biggest desire for a GEMP update, where I can just check a box and only ever see the normal language, original version, non-foil.
And it's something we'll get to eventually, but it requires kind of an involved update, unfortunately.
I'm sure it's far more of a pet peeve than it is actually useful. But
I don't know. Like I said, lots of people were going that route. So I think that it was it was a not zero benefit that was being abused there.
Yeah. Well, I did it as well. I had so many coins when I got back that I started switching everything into a foil version just for the heck of it.
Yeah,
And then
thankfully,
for
foils can be turned off.
well, I didn't turn on my foil animation because that's hard.
Yeah, I always play with
Yeah,
foils
this
turned
week-
off.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not
this
great.
week,
Not a great animation. We'll get that updated too someday.
well, and here we have the Moria deck, and well, I have a long love for Moria, so I'm actually quite happy that I got to play it. I really like it. There was one card that was added to the original deck, that is Foul Things.
Oh yes, with
Foul
the
Things,
PC
you can
for
get
that.
the discarded conditions back, or a cave troll.
The PC Errata on that's really nice.
Yeah, so all we did on this one was we changed it from play a Moria minion to play a Moria card, because this never saw play. It was obviously intended, based on the picture, to be used with tentacles, but tentacles don't care to spend 2 extra for a tentacle, so it just never got used. But yeah, so people were using it all over the place, yourself included, to recycle discarded goblin armories, and or even, yeah, in your case you also used it for a cave troll. Like lots of more uses nowadays.
Yeah, I think that's the two most important things: returning the cave troll and playing back Goblin Armory.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a fun part. I like it a lot. And
Where's the? Sorry, I'm getting myself mixed up here. Yeah, so here's the Moria deck.
yeah, and I play 3. Where are they? Orc ambushers. In the
Yes,
deck.
yeah, that was also a major part of your win there at the end. You had all 3 Orc Ambushers in your discard pile, and then you pulled them all with Toll Brandier to just seal the deal and make sure that
Yeah.
there was no.
Yeah, the goal is to have drawn every card of the deck. And maybe
You cycle a handful with sneaks, but
maybe a bit of orcs are still lurking on the bottom, but getting those 3 guys is sometimes quite necessary for a swarm if they play power according to their stature. Those 2 vitality make quite a difference. Sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Which
yeah,
is
there's no
something
Moria trackers.
yeah, I used the strategy a long time ago, and I thought I'd use it here again. Yeah, my goal was also to draw the whole deck, so I tried to make it as lean as possible and not play any card that doesn't belong there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I played one card that didn't belong there, but most of it's just really the basics.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part, I mean, this, just looking kind of at a glance, you got your 4 scimitars, your 4 armories, 2 swarms, 2 relics, 2 they are comings. Like, this is a very kind of boilerplate Moria deck that was just played really, really well.
Yeah.
And even surprisingly in some ways, because I believe it was you that played the Balrog on Site 4 for the final match, right?
Yeah. I played the Balrog on Site 4. Which is awesome.
We were talking about that during the commentary, wondering if you were running 2 copies. Was this were you giving up a Site 5 Balrog and a Moria deck for an early stop? Or did you have another one coming? And we didn't have your deck list at that point, so it was a bit of a point of discussion.
In that case, I thought that another cave troll would probably be better because it doesn't cost 14, but it would have been fun.
But at the same time, yeah, I think that it was a major mind game too, because now you've put him into a unique situation where most of the time when the Balrog is on the table, you can move to discard him. But that was the one situation where that was not true, since he was at Site 4 and you'd be moving to Site 5. So that would have, I think that definitely probably put a bit of a wrench in his mental thinking, which was great to see. That was a wonderful moment.
It was really cool.
Yeah, I think I got lucky. No, I didn't got lucky. He played 2 Erratas and he only had 2 in his deck. So that was, well, maybe lucky because he didn't have a third one. And
Oh,
that
yeah.
was the only one he could have won in the end, because I got back some of those conditions in the meantime. But well, it's quite hard if when you don't have access to any of them.
Hmm. And that was actually a big part of our discussion too, was the fact that the Faker had gone almost entirely through, or up until that moment, we had never seen his Fellowship deck because all of his games had been in the upper bracket where PC Movie was being played. So yeah, we had no idea either. Did he pack 3 sleeps? Did he pack 2? It was it basically all came down to whether or not he had more of those. And yeah, as you say, he didn't. He just had the 2. And
I was really crossing my fingers on the last side one. Don't play it. Don't play it. Don't play it. Okay. He's here, Gandalf. It can be played. He's not playing him. Yes. And then it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do, but I knew it was happening. Unless he had like three power according to the stature, and even then, I think I would have won because of the fierce Balrog.
mm-hmm.
But oh well. And the fellowship was that was the hard part, because I I haven't really seen this fellowship until I've played Skild's deck, and I didn't know what Skild was actually playing during the group stage. So I tried to make a 35 card fellowship centered around Aragorn and Bilbo. Starting Aragorn, look for Bilbo, and then play a bunch of cards for Aragorn and a bunch of tails.
There was one game you were playing against a Nazgul deck where we watched Bilbo get discarded twice with fear, and we're wondering how big a deal that was going to be, only for the very next Fellowship phase him to show back up.
Well, that was lucky, I guess.
Can't keep him down.
It's not that great because they usually play. You need Atlas to get rid of their conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, those Nazgul decks raised my heart beat quite a bit in the first 2 sides every time. So just hoping that they wouldn't have a great hand, because I don't think that this deck is greatly suited against Nazgul on the first few sides.
Mm-hmm. I can't imagine it would have been as stressful as the site 2 that you came across in round 2 though against the Faker, with the giant troll and advanced swarm coming in.
Yeah, that was actually the most fun game I played. It only lasted 2 sides, but playing like almost the perfect starting hand, for my opinion, and then just getting crushed on side 2. It was actually awesome to see. Not fun at the time, but it's.
And then in game
with the value of hindsight,
in the finals, you basically went through almost exactly the same moves, except there were somewhat fewer advanced guys being thrown against you, but you still had 2 of the trolls come down into play. It was starting to look almost like a complete repeat of what had happened, but things were much different on your end. You had managed to get things like your Tale of the Great Ring out, and some of those other helpers and there were just not quite as many orcs as there were before, so it was more survivable for you. But it was definitely a great moment to see it almost repeated.
I've given that much Twilight to anyone ever on side 2. It's like 49 or something, or maybe more.
Yeah, I think the single best part of that game 1 of the final, best of 3, was just in chat. Basmelis, you type something along the lines of, "Well, let's see if I can make it past 2."
And you almost did, but pulled it out.
Yeah, well, in the second game, I knew that he was playing these big red guys, so I went to 7. I actually thought about it for a minute. So, do I want to play the same strategy again? But this time, I will go to 7 companions and have a Tale of the Great Ring. So, if he does the same thing, I will hopefully survive at least one side.
And you did. You made it all the way to the end.
Yeah. Yeah, on the topic of the PC movie format, this was a deck that I also played during the group stage and also during the format championships. And I don't think I lost in total one game before the World Championship. So I'm quite convinced that this is a great deck.
Yeah, you had just dropped one game in PC movie, so yeah.
Yeah, I lost the last game against Piss deck, which would be my first opponent in this in the World Championship. So I thought about switching up, but I didn't think that he would be switching up since he won. And I think I had a good matchup if I tweaked a few cards.
So let's see here. What did you end up? Pull this out here so we can do a comparison.
We're getting side by side of the changes. Yeah.
So let's see. So you have. Looks like you dropped one copy of Saruman.
Yeah, the shadow sides I didn't change that much, but his deck, it relied on Greenleaf and and shooting all my guys down. So and also not giving a lot of Twilight. So in the first on the first like 4, 5, 6 sites, I wouldn't be able to get anything on the ground and skirmish anything. Mm-hmm. So Saruman and Burn Every Village weren't that good. So I cut them down to 2 each instead of 3 Saruman and 4 Burn Every Village. And I just played an extra Constantly Threatening and an Over the Eisen. And also 1 Wild Man raid. And that Wild Man raid came in handy in that final game. Because they played Citadel of the Stars. And that just killed. But it could also kill an even worse sphere. I was actually testing this deck against his deck, so I built both decks and I started playing against myself. And I was trying to figure out if it was a good matchup or not, or if and what they could play to annihilate me. And the worst card that they could play was 6th level to get back their Citadel of the Stars and Stone Battle. And I wanted 1 card in my deck to eliminate that that card essentially.
And yeah, that ended up paying off for you, even in the finals. So,
he didn't play 6th level. He played a sword that liberated a side, which he also used, so that was also a good card. Mm-hmm. But this worked only 1 Ankia because I thought I needed at least 1 Ankia, but I actually hate that card in the deck. Does nothing. And all of the other cards just want to control sites and play Elders. I introduced my friend to this deck by saying I'm playing a bunch of guys that are like 1 minute from the movie, and they are all and dirty, and they have a stick, and they only want to have to control a village, and that's all they want to do. And if I have my guy with a stick, Aragorn can't beat him, Legolas can't beat him because they have a suit on.
Yeah,
it's like a Kevlar.
Yeah, it is interesting how all of these, this entire archetype, is pulled from like 2 minutes of film. It's makes it kind of hard to design new cards for it. Let me tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can go a little bit more into the book history for some background stuff, but that becomes far more like a reflection set to get the historic Dunland characters.
Yeah, they do something in the Shire, I think, later on, right?
Well, so they're actually involved at the Helm's Deep battle, which they're not in the movie. But the Dunlanders were supposed to be one of the armies that was there. So there's potential to do stuff there, have some kind of sieging aspect to them, but yeah, not a whole lot of material.
Yeah. And well, my choice for Genland was because I think it's great against most decks, and it's horrible against some other. If anyone plays an Elendil, I'll just lose, I guess. There are also a couple of other side liberating cards, and also a bunch like a knight deck with recurring 5th levels and Citadel of Stars is quite hard. But some
At
decks
least one of those in the group stage. I don't know if you came up against it, but
I don't think so.
There were
Well,
quite a few.
if I see a deal, I just need to run. There's no way I can beat that fellowship, so then let's hope that my fellowship beats it.
There were lots of elf men decks that splashed Citadel, but yeah, it didn't look like there were any dedicated knights that made it to the top 8. And yeah, not a single person played Elendil, so your bet paid off.
I faced one of those decks in the group stages. I'm forgetting the name of the opponent, and the links are not working for me to check. But there was somebody playing that in group. It absolutely trounced my shadow. They did a very good job. I just couldn't tell you who it was.
Wow, there's quite a few of these knight decks with Elendil in the group stage. At least 4 or 5 different people.
Yeah, those links for the replays aren't working for me, so I can't check to see which one it was that I faced. But whoever it was, they did great. Their free peoples absolutely destroyed my shadow.
And also, my wife played it, so if she would ever run against me, she wanted an edge.
Oh,
I wish I could get my partner to play this game. That would be great.
Oh yeah, there are some bugs in here. I'll have to go check that afterwards and see what's up. Yeah, I've tried to introduce my wife to it, and it didn't work all that well. I played through a couple of starter deck games with her, and it just didn't take. I've had better luck with my brother-in-law, though.
Yeah, well, it helps that my wife is an incredibly big Lord of the Rings fan, and we're also incredibly big card games and board games fans. So it took me a while to introduce it to her because it's quite a big hurdle to start on because it's quite difficult to learn, I think. But once you get the hang of it, then well, there's a lot of fun things that you can try out.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I want to be addressing here in the near to medium future is we need to have better tutorials and we need to have better on ramps, some sort of even cut down version of Fellowship, even that's just something that is much more digestible and only has a few cards so that you can learn what all the different card types are and what it is that you're doing and understanding the switch back and forth between the different fellowships. There's a lot of things that we could do, I think, just to GEMP to make it easier for new players to grasp the game and then let them loose and say, okay, now go learn all the cards, because those are two completely different problems. And while I don't think I can make it any easier to learn 3,500 cards, I think we can make it easier to learn the mechanics.
Yeah, I think one thing that would really help there, and I've really come to love that in normal play, I don't have the ability to go back. If I make a mistake, it's my mistake to have made.
Mm-hmm.
But when teaching the game...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there needs to be an undo option for super casual play or tutorial play or something where, oops, you shouldn't have played that, let's undo it and let me explain why. Because, it's brutal for a brand new player. Because in real life, people will show me a card and be like, hey, should I play this now? And I would walk them through the the ramifications of why you should or shouldn't. Or if they do something, I can say, okay, you could do that, but let me just give you a little bit of insight. Do you want to undo with that information? And you just can't do that in GEMP.
It's so hard. YK and I have tried to get a bunch of our friends into it, and some of them seem to like it, but only have tried to play with us when one of us is sharing our screen.
Yeah.
So one of us is playing, the other one is watching the screen share of the new player, and we're talking through everything before any buttons are clicked.
Mm-hmm.
But it only takes one left click instead of right click, and suddenly you've played a card that was not intended.
Yeah, and it's Yeah, and I totally get how confusing it is too. Like these screens are not easy to just understand what's going on. Like we've got these two fellowships, and like even just something as simple as graying out the inactive cards, something to just communicate a little better. Yeah, there's a lot of improvements that need to be done for the new player side, so that we can actually, in earnest, recruit our friends instead of expecting them to jump through a bunch of hoops before they're allowed to have fun.
Right. And for a lot of that, even if it was only true in like you tag the game as learning or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
because I really have come to appreciate that nobody's asking for a take back. Because there's in games where that's allowed, there's a point, especially at like when you're really trying to test a deck and be more competitive and do tournaments and whatever, where it's like, I don't want it to be on me to decide if you're allowed to undo something.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be the jerk, but I also don't want to lose because you made a bad decision and realized it too late.
Right.
I like that. I think it makes us all better players once we know how to play and are trying to get into the game more.
Yeah,
thoroughly.
and that is a pretty big caveat for most people.
Yep.
Yes, I also like the option for a training match with takebacks possibility. I also liked the suggestion that you would implement a ranking system.
Yeah, and so
for-
that was the other side of this that I was going to bring up, is that if we're going to have like a clear marker between casual play tables and competitive tables like that, ranked tables, then that would be a shoe-in to say, okay, well, you can do undos in casual tables, but you can't do undos in competitive tables, or
You want
something
three
like
categories if you're going to go that route.
Fair.
You want a learning table, a casual table, and a competitive table.
Yeah, because
like
people
so
that are testing stuff for the ranked tables don't want to be doing that testing live. Yeah, I can see
right. Post Worlds, I've been building some new decks. I'm trying to play something other than Pipeweed for a little while, and they're definitely casual games. I'm making mistakes left and right. I'm learning how cards interact, more properly. I lost a game yesterday because I didn't realize sent back is an fellowship action, so I can't do it where the wizard is never late. Those kinds of things. But I don't want takebacks to be slowing the game down. I just want to be, I don't want it to
making
count
those
towards my
mistakes
elo.
and getting them
Like
figured out.
I'm learning how cards work. I'm learning how a deck functions. I'm doing something I've never played before.
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea of competitive tables where we are tracking elos and being able to use those for bigger tournaments and having that kind of nature of like, nope, we're coming in here. This is a deck I know. I'm happy for it.
Yeah.
But I don't want to have to be in that mode if I'm trying to get away from takebacks.
True. Yeah, that makes total sense.
But in the same way that right now we can blitz or normal or glacier, like I think just
kind of, but to be honest, like that's not enough. Not enough communication, and half the time I think people get surprised by it anyway. So yeah, we just need to rework that whole concept and make it so that there are more tags that you can put on tables, and even maybe on your own end be able to ignore certain kinds of tables. So if you're a super casual player, you're like, okay, I'm just never going to play ranked, so I'm just going to ignore ranked tables and make it so they don't even show up or something like that. Like,
sure.
Yeah, there needs to be more options here. In fact, this whole row here is going to need to be just moved to a different screen. I think we've already crammed too many things into this tiny little section. But so I wanted, before we got too much into the weeds on some of those things, I wanted to bring up explicitly with you, basmelis, what are some of the changes that you would like to see in the meta? Like specifically, are there any specific errata that you think we should revisit, or any cards that are currently, or strategies even, that are currently in need of an errata, either to be nerfed or to be buffed? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
We also had two of my decks next to each other a while ago, and then we got off a tangent.
Yeah, true.
But to answer this question, I also filled on the forum for you guys, but there's a lot to say about this topic. I mean, it's two big formats, and I just started playing last summer, so I haven't exactly gotten around to play all of the strategies. In Fellowship Block, I think that Too Great and Terrible is too great and terrible. I actually think that Gandalf is unplayable, even though people play Gandalf. Also think that there were games in the group stage that were decided by side 2 because someone had a Gandalf and someone had a too great and terrible. It's a bit much, I think.
Yeah,
It pushes out.
This whole cycle of cards that they came out with in set 3 that were designed to target a specific character and bring them down is really kind of a mystifying choice to me. One for Gandalf, one for Galadriel, one for Aragorn, one for Boromir, and one for Bilbo. And yeah, it strikes me as thinking from a completely different game. Like it's a very Star Wars way of looking at things, that we're going to make a silver bullet for these particular cards. But I think they started moving away from that eventually because they realized that was not really a concept that worked so well in this game. And in fact, we have already had to errata the Terrible as the Dawn for...
Right, because they made her a ring bearer.
Yeah, because they made her a ring bearer, and so you had this ability to just go in and mow down whoever picked the Galadriel ring bearer, and so we had to adjust it so that it wasn't quite so powerful in that situation. So yeah, it may warrant taking a look at Too Great and Terrible as well.
Probably worth taking a glance at each of those. I do like the silver bullet idea, but hitting Bilbo or hitting Galadriel the ally are very different than hitting the companion that the deck is built around.
Yeah.
And at least the Aragorn one, because I know Boromir has a silver bullet too, but he doesn't tend to be who your deck's built for. The Aragorn one, like, you can just add 2 burdens, but it's also an exhaust or 2 burdens. You can't be killed by it.
Yeah.
Too Great and Terrible can just wreck you. I played a game. I technically won, but I don't think I actually beat him. I played Aaron in the group stages. I've looked at his deck since, and I'm pretty sure he would have trounced me, but I just got lucky. I had both my 2 Great and Terribles turn 1. He only needed to give me 6 Twilight for me to play Ringwraith and Twilight and nuke his Gandalf before he got set up.
Yeah.
That was not me beating him. That was me getting very lucky with a card draw that is just silver bullet.
Yeah, so yeah, that's definitely something we can look at. I think we can throw that on the list and see if we can come up with a good way to make this a little better, a little more fair.
That was at least the card that decided all of my deck choices from the start of this format. But on the other hand, if Gandalf isn't played, then Moria is cool, but Sleep Paralysis is also a very powerful card.
Yeah, and like we mentioned earlier in the stream, that's something that we'll probably be taking a look at here at some point, trying to reel that in, those big condition nukes.
But overall, I actually very much like the PC format, Fellowship of the Ring. I think that all of the different shadows are, all of the different cultures have a viable shadow.
In PC Fellowship? Yeah.
The lack of Forest Mogul Gates. Yeah, that's the choice that you need to make if you play cards like Too Great and Terrible and the relentless charge. It costs other cards.
The opportunity cost.
Like
Mortal Gates is great. Get your Nazgul cheaper, but it's a card from your hand. I often don't run any at all.
But this specific deck that we're looking at has less Nazgul. It also has a Sovereign Orc team to it.
Oh yeah, this particular one that we happen to be zoomed to. I was just looking for a copy of Too Great and Terrible to bring it up on screen, but yeah.
This is also funny. He's also playing the Orc Ambusher and Solbrandir.
Yeah. It's a good late game combo there for only 3, and like you said, you get the two vitality. That's a good killer combo.
Yeah, I do feel in general Sight 9s and Fellowship block, either there's a perfect one for you, or nothing quite fits very well.
And that's something that
teching around them is a good idea.
Yeah, I think that they did a very good job in Fellowship block with the Sight 9s, and then I think that in movie they're somewhat less impactful. on the King block side. It seems like so many things just came together properly for Fellowship. Um, I'm not I don't know exactly what all just happened to work together, but that is one of those things I've noticed is that the Site Nines in general are not nearly as Hail Mary as they are in Fellowship.
Yeah, I think King Block has this problem, and to be clear, it's not a problem for King Block. It's a problem for Movie, where every block's sites are based around the big players in those blocks.
Mm-hmm.
But King Block ended up being the sites we use for this general movie, before they changed all the shadow cultures, before we changed how site paths work.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, there's no sites for lots of strategies. And I
Yeah.
know, and I think you wanted to talk about it as part of this thing. We can certainly push it off to a little bit later, but you wanted to talk about the multipath. Because I think that's going to make a really big meta shift in just how we can utilize sites for different cultures.
Yep. I think that changing PC Movie to be a multipath format is going to be a big shift. It's the biggest bang for buck change we could possibly make to bring not only the Fellowship sites in to be used, but also the Tower sites, which are very much a kind of a redheaded stepchild that don't get played anywhere because, unless you are playing Tower Standard or Towers Block, nobody ever uses them. And like you said, the blocks are often built around a particular cluster of cultures, and so Isengard will get a big boost by being able to utilize a lot of those Isengard boosting sites, and it will just mix up the variety so much more because the King block path is just boring. It's not fantastic.
I think it's the smallest site pool of any block.
And it feels even smaller because most of the sites are just variants of each other. Like you have exactly
Right.
one kind of thing that you can get for Site 6. It's just pick a culture and then heal everybody if they move during the rigor phase. Like so, even though there's 7 different versions of this, they're all the same.
Well, there's one different, which is the wound everybody if you walk past.
Which is really just a reflection of that same concept. Instead of healing everybody, wound everybody. And so yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited for multipath, even if it's just I can play other site paths. I know there's plans that are way bigger and cooler than that, but even if that's all it was, I want to be able to drop the Balrog against a whole bunch of knights. I think that sounds like so much fun.
I like the idea of the multipath. There was a sealed multipath before the World Championship, which was which was quite strange. Quite strange to move along a multipath.
Yeah,
it does get the movie feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Just jumping around.
It's one of those things where I think that sites in particular, more than any other mechanic in this game, have a struggle between what's lore friendly and what's fun. Because on the one hand, you have, for instance, the shadow sites, the shadow site path that is mechanically actually pretty deep as far as being able to pick your own site path and manipulate that site path to be exactly what you want and all that. But of course, then you're left with a lore that has you teleporting all over Middle Earth and going back to the exact same site 7 times down the path and all kinds of stuff that doesn't feel good from just from a Lord of the Rings fan perspective. But then on the other side of the spectrum, you end up with the technically very lore-filled, King path that is just kind of garbage to play mechanically. And so, honestly, I feel like the best thing that we're going to be able to do is to just kind of mix the two and say, all right, well, it's not going to be the best lore-filled thing, but at least we will move away from being mechanically fossilized and just try to give us a little more options, a little more consideration. And if somebody really wants to have that, lore-filled experience, then you can just play a mirror match and say that, okay, well, my opponent, we are playing on this particular site path this time, and that will restore that lore bit without necessarily restricting what anybody can do in the format.
Yep.
You could also just play an older format.
And that's true. Yeah, the Decipher formats will always be around. If you think that that's the superior option, then absolutely go for it. My vision is eventually, hopefully, to have the PC versions be a better. I want the PC versions to be like Fellowship is for all of the movies, because Fellowship did a very, very good job of lining up the lore of what you're supposed to be doing and the mechanics of what you actually are doing. And I want to restore a lot of that and see if we can make some of these other ones feel more thematic for Aragorn's story or Theoden's story or whatever else, instead of being tied so tightly, I think, to Frodo's story in Fellowship of the Ring. But
Yeah, I know there's been some really cool discussions around some of that too. Which maybe step one is just a Shire to Mount Doom single site path, but over time you get lots of kind of other stories, site paths around that you've. I don't know if it's you or if it was somebody else, but
it
I
was
suspect it
somebody
was you,
else came
Katarina.
in with an actual good suggestion for a single site path thing. So lots of people over decades have tried to make the suggestion that, oh, we'll just do, the first 3 sites is Fellowship and the next 3 sites is Towers, and then the last 3 sites be King. And every time it comes up, you have to point out, well, okay, that means that you're doing the Bridge of Khazad-dûm on site 2. Like,
Right.
there's a lot of very bad ramifications for doing that. But then somebody recently, yeah, like you said, came in and said, well, okay, well, what if it's not 333, and you just do the first 5 sites be Fellowship, and then the next 2,
Yeah, you do 522.
yeah, 522, and it was like, oh, hey, that actually might almost make the concept like reasonable.
And there's probably quite a bit of overlap there you can do at the end too,
Mhm.
where it's 5 Fellowship, for sure 1 Towers, for sure 1 King. With
And then
those
have it
middle
be
ones,
kind of a
as long
mix.
as you're cautious about it, because at that there's so many different routes that people are taking, right? Like Frodo's in the Dead Marshes, that can totally happen before or after somebody's at Helm's Deep.
Yeah.
There's pieces here that technically are in different books, but are not the wrong order of travel.
Mm-hmm.
They're just different parts of the world that you could take routes through.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff we can do with sites and experiment with, but that's something that we can design it all day, but we're just gonna have to put it into playtesting and see how it actually works out.
100%.
But
Yeah, and especially as long as you're keeping sanctuaries at 3 and 6, there's always going to be some weirdness around that.
and that is actually
it
one of the
works
things
so
that I
well
have
for
thought
Fellowship
about.
block.
That's actually one of the things that I've thought about challenging, because yeah, it works really, really well for Fellowship, but not for the others. And so, what if you
Right.
actually just shifted where the sanctuaries are for Towers and King? Do something like Site 3 and Site 5 for Towers, and maybe do like a Site 4 sanctuary for King and no second sanctuary. Like try to actually distinguish them and make them match the story a little better, and make
Well, and
them.
if you're doing, that could actually be really cool. So if you're doing the whole 5-2-2 or 5-1-1 and then some mess, you could potentially have sites 2 or 3, depending on where Rivendell is,
Mhm.
be a sanctuary. 5 could be if it's Lothlorien. 6 could be if it's Edoras.
Oh well,
but if you
that could
build
get
it
a
in
little
such a
fraught if you
way
ended up with
where
3 sanctuaries.
well,
So-
but that's if you build it in a way where when your site path has 2, then maybe you end up with 3 if you're going back and forth. But usually, unless we've got site manipulation, I think it's pretty common that one of us is behind and the other one's sites are being played.
Mhm.
But I think it could be really interesting to be like, when you're building your deck, you choose if you have Rivendell or Lothlorien or Edoras or Minas Tirith. Like, those are the possibilities for where a sanctuary might be, but you're deciding which ones are in your site path. How
Right.
is your fellowship traveling? And as long as you then limit the total number of sanctuaries, you definitely don't want 4 of them to end up over the course of
Right,
it
yeah,
in a normal game.
that's what's got me a little. That could probably get a little fraught, but yeah, definitely something that we could play with. Well, this has kind of been trending towards more and more talk about meta and things. So, Basmelis, is there anything else you want to talk about, like when it comes to your performance here at the top 8?
Well, we could still talk about my my movie deck Fellowship.
Oh yeah,
I haven't spoken about that one.
let's see. Oh, those are both of the. Oh yes, yes.
One where I was troll swarmed on side 2.
Hmm.
Yeah, so this I've been playing this Gandalf deck since the start, and the changes that I made for this tournament was at least Sam, because there are more. Well, I faced a few corruption decks, so Sam is helpful there. Also, Gwaihir, Lord of Eagles, is a fun card. I really dislike the new version of Radagast. Radagast used to just give the opponent two more cycle 2 cards when you move twice, but now the opponent gets to cycle 2 cards every single time, and I think that's too well. I think that's too bad.
Hmm.
Also, when he dies, then you don't get the bonus anymore. So I don't think it's a good card anymore. So I just played the other guy, the Gwaihir,
Hmm.
which also gets the move limit plus. Although there's another reason why Radagast is not great, because it's not an end, so it cannot be used to the other ends.
Yep.
Yeah, Radagast was definitely in that position where people would just kind of splash him in. Yeah, he technically was, a Gandalf card, and because he was a wizard, you could use him with sent back and some other shenanigans. But in a lot of Ent decks, yeah, he was just there to enable the run. Um, and yeah, he was. It may very well be that we have over nerfed him, and now he's in a situation where it doesn't make sense to use him. Outside of the top 8, people are still using him quite a bit, perhaps just out of habit. But
Well, he's still getting used, so I think it's a good nerf. I just think personally that it's worse than Gwaihir.
I think that's really one of those things that's. I love the way you say it. He's still getting used. He's just maybe not as good as some of the other options. And maybe
Well,
full on, like he's just not as good, but he fills a different role, right? Because your deck goes through 9 companions. Between the ones that die from Saved by the Fire and the ones that you want on the table. You also have this question of like, do I have this extra companion? Whereas I think in a lot of decks, he's still a really easy splash because you go, okay, I'm not in danger of Inkea. My big guys all have 4 health. I'm going to run this turn. And he's an extra body out there in a way that Gwaihir is not.
Playing Radagast seems logical.
Right, yeah. And I think in that way, it's a really good nerf where it gives more choices that are all worthwhile in the right deck. As opposed to one just always being the right answer.
mhm.
Yeah. So
Sorry, I keep getting into the whole like, how should we be nerfing it? I know that's a later conversation.
It's good. I love it, this discussion. So don't feel bad about it. But I like Gwaihir a lot. It's he gives the option to move again, and he also he heals Frodo in my deck. Frodo is the only one he can heal, which which was good against this archery deck that I actually needed to play, and it's also good against Morgul orcs.
Oh yeah,
So
which
that's
did not show up at all. But
no,
yeah.
it's also
It's
good
really
against.
strong against Twilight Nazgul as well, which I also don't think we saw in the top 8.
But you do need to move in front. You need to move on the opponent's sides to make it work, which is also I think a fun use of the card, because if you don't move in front, then you have to use it to move past the opponent.
Yeah, so it's
So
got
it's
nice use in either situation. Yeah.
Which feels really thematic. He's soaring past them. Like he can't just be catching up.
Yeah. So I played this, but I also played him. I think in the group stage. The big difference for the World Championship itself was the 2 Elven allies, Elrond and Calaglin.
I'm trying to remember. Calgren gives you the option to kind of snipe minions during the regroup phase. Did that come in really clutch in any of the matches?
Well, I was testing this deck against different strategies by playing it against myself. And one of the things that I sometimes absolutely need to do is to move faster than the opponent. Sometimes the opponent has a strategy that just can beat my Dunland strategy. So you have to move, and Calaglin is a way to move faster. Also, it's an elf, but I can find this elf because I have one Council of the Wise in the deck, which I can find with servants Saves from the Fire.
Yep.
It does give a lot of Twilight because, well, if you find Council of the Wise and then find Elrond and then play Elrond, it gives like
8.
a
Yeah.
billion Twilight. Which got me in trouble, certainly.
just that one time.
But it is good against. Well, since I'm trying to play everything on side one, as usually people don't play 7 trolls, so it doesn't matter if you give them 4 more Twilight or not. But it was added to find Elrond in the first place, so to get even more healing, which is always good. Elrond is a good card, especially if you have it on side 1. And for the rest, I used to play an Ottar, which I didn't. Well, I needed to cut some cards, so Ottar got left behind. 3 bottom and Butterbur was the same. I cut the Roll of Thunder, and I replaced the Deep in Thought with another condition removal card. I noticed that nobody was actually playing a lot of artifacts or possessions, so Roll of Thunder doesn't really do anything. And which also made Deep in Thought a bit of a liability sometimes, because not always you have for the extra Twilight to run it. So that's why I played a Grown Suddenly Tall instead.
I have what might be kind of a noob interaction question with your 3 Barlamans. Yes. So can you use Barlaman to grab a Wizard is Never Late to grab Barlaman to heal Barlaman?
No.
Or no, is a Wizard is Never Late only work if he's not already in play?
Wizard's Never Late says play, not take it to your hand. So.
Well, right, no, I know it says play. I wasn't sure if the rule about having somebody in your hand and using them to heal was technically playing, or if it was discarding for an effect.
That's discarding.
I think this would have been good if you put it into your hand, because then that adds to the number of cards that you've drawn.
Oh, right, which just hugely gets you around the rule of 4. Wizard is Never Late, and the Bilbo one for Hobbits. Symbol Murner, I think, also does the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Oh, Symbolamine? Yeah, the...
Symbolamine.
One.
I always just kind of make a point of coughing while I'm trying to say it.
Symbol Murmur, yeah. That
so,
one.
Well, Theoden says it once in the movie, so it should be obvious what it's called.
Right,
yeah, I
right.
need to go back and listen to it.
And for the rest, well, only 2 cards for Gandalf's Staff and Naya, because 3 cards is a liability against Wormtongue. Gandalf doesn't need to fight anyway, so giving him the Staff is always good, cancelling skirmishes, and Naya getting rid of burdens is always good, if you need it to be. The Kraken to Rebel is against other side control decks, which I haven't seen a lot of, but well, it's still 1 card in the deck which you can play 4 times thanks to Ballerman, and that makes a difference. Have Patience heals companions, which I used a lot against the archery strategy.
Yeah, you pulled it out there in the finals too, I think, a couple times.
Yeah, and Out of the High Airs has an errata on it.
Yes.
It's exert them twice instead of once, and discard only 3 cards instead of all of them.
Which, in the situation where you used it and you discarded 2 anyway, it's not like that part actually came into much of an account. But yeah.
Yeah, it makes it not destroy a swarm that's already like almost enough, but it gets rid of a couple of trolls or the Witch King and Atea just fine.
Yeah, well, there have been situations that they have more than 3 minions, especially Morgul Orc decks have usually more than 3 minions on the table that might survive. So it does come up, and also exerting Gandalf twice is costly, but the card is just too good to not play if you want to if you plan on moving on to the end of the side path.
Yeah.
For sure.
And if the Dunland side is working, then you don't need to do anything with your Gandalf Fellowship. Because if Dunland is good at anything, it's killing the opponent if it starts working.
Yeah. Once they start rolling in with the very dangerous elders, War Club discarding everything that might matter. Yeah.
And also OVIs in choosing who to assign. Well, that's the reason that I actually played. I love Dunland because it's really consistent in that matter.
Mm-hmm.
If it's winning, then you will win with it. If it's not, then you won't.
So I'm really curious about your Frodo choice.
My what?
Your Frodo choice. You
Frodo.
played Tired Traveler who removes burdens with Ringbound Companions, but you only have one Ringbound Companion.
Yeah, it has a Gandalf Signet for Gwaihir.
Oh, okay. Yep. No, that makes perfect sense. I'm scrolling through your deck on the side here, and I'm like, wouldn't the 12 resistance be better? But the 12 resistance is a Frodo Signet, isn't it?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of Gandalf options. You've got the one that heals Hobbit allies, but of course he doesn't have.
But there's none in the deck. Yeah.
So and at least you get the benefit of playing Sam to remove another burden. So there's at least
right. So it's effectively an 11 throughout the game. No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and also removing one burden is useful if you do it before side 4, because that side actually does something with the burdens. Yeah, this one was also on my radar, the Wicked Master, because it also had a Gandalf Signet. But I felt that removing the one burden against potential corruption strategies would be more valuable than the one wound that you might do on a side.
Yeah, this
6
one
to
has
8.
always seemed so costly. 4 burdens for a single wound.
I think it's really solid if you're playing a heavy burden removal deck. If you've got like a Smeagol Sam Shire Countryside scenario going on, it's not 4 burdens for a single wound. It's 4 burdens that lets your healing engine kick off. True. And they will go away, so you can do it several times. But you need a deck built around it.
Right. And I guess that makes sense. I just look at it and I think, wow, I'm paying 3 extra burdens so that I don't have to have paths in my hand. This is
right.
Yeah.
If what you're doing is finding a Frodo that fits in your deck that has its, Sting and Elbreth and maybe, there and back again as the only support, I think Wicked Master is not going to go very well for you.
Yeah.
But I think there's a deck that can be built for it. Anything that's using something like Shire Countryside needs burdens, so you need a way of adding them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of ways of doing it. You can do things like paths. I'm currently playing with a deck that uses Bilbo, just specifically to be able to add burdens when I don't play anything. But you need to have them there, otherwise your healing falls apart.
Yeah.
So I think that Frodo is a potential for why or for how to do that.
Yeah.
But it's not a drop in Frodo. So,
Basmelis, what are your thoughts on the balance of Saved from the Fire? Obviously, you used it in yours. What are your thoughts on where it is right now? As far as, is it too powerful? Is it just right? Like, what do you think?
Well, it's hard to tell. I like the card because it gives the deck a lot of consistency. But killing your own companion has its costs as well, of course, and it usually gives the opponent a lot of Twilight. So strategies that use that Twilight are better off with it. But I'm not sure how you would fix this card, because if you errata it to just take 2 cards from your hand, then it's just, I don't think the card will work anymore. if you use it as an event in the maneuver phase, or then it also won't work. Maybe in the regroup phase, but then you will be cluttered with all of those cards in your hand. You could increase the twilight of the card, but well,
It's already doing that.
You
You're
should-
already dropping 40 Twilight. Yeah.
Right.
it's a hard card to errata, I think.
Yeah, the only
I'm not sure.
thought that I had really had on it was changing it so that you would put the 3 cards on the top of your deck, and so that in addition to needing Save from the Fire, you would also need card draw to then pull them off if you wanted them right now. Otherwise, it would be clogged for the future. But yeah, that runs into the same problem you mentioned with the
That also feels bad. I don't think it's working.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh wait,
That-
there
that
there was one that I had suggested once that would change it so that there were 3 different things you would do with the 3 cards. You would put one in your hand, one in the discard, and one on top of your deck, or something like that. You know, kind of split it up and spread them out. But yeah, it kind of.
I could see it being choose 3 cards, and your opponent lets you have 2 of them, and the other one gets shuffled in or discarded.
like effect. But then you should. Well, then I don't think that makes the card very bad. I think maybe you should find 4 cards and then let the 4 different named cards, and then let the opponent choose one of them and put them in your discard pile.
Right.
Yeah.
That
So you
that
do your best.
drastically would change deck builds because you're no longer running one off of anything you're hoping to pull with it.
Yeah.
The kind of
But then
other obvious
I mean,
levers would be it's only 2 cards, or you don't spot Gandalf, you exert Gandalf.
that's possible.
Though, of course, if you're choosing Gandalf as your target, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Though maybe it shouldn't work with Gandalf as the target, because the sent back interaction, I know you're not playing with it in this deck, but that is one of those pieces that I see that seems potentially problematic.
We did address sent back so that it's not quite as abusable now that you're only able to do it. Well, I guess if you're doing
Well,
Save from the
it's
Fire, you
fellowship,
still-
so you don't die during
No.
a skirmish only to come back, but you can still save from the fire your leader of men, who only costs 2,
Mhm.
to grab whatever Gandalf you're looking for, plus sent back, plus probably his staff, but maybe an Ent if that's the deck you're going with.
Yeah, I don't know. To be honest, that sounds like A-okay to me, because you have now spent 6, 7, 8 Twilight, 10 Twilight just to replace your Gandalf, which is, fair
also-
enough, I think.
No,
about-
and that's fair. I don't think Save from the Fire with Gandalf is a big problem with setback. I think Save from the Fire with Gandalf is a big problem with Ents.
Oh, the main problem is Ents being Gandalf culture. Ents should have been their own thing.
If they were just their own thing, yeah.
And maybe someday, like 3 or 4 years from now, we can address that. But that's
They're more Hobbit culture, right? Because Pippin and Merry activate them.
Yeah, if they were going to be an existing culture, Hobbit makes the most sense to me. But I think you get into a problem. There's too many cards that exert a Shire companion.
Yeah, but then you play Pippin and kill Pippin to get 3 Ents. Which is
yeah,
the-
they just need to be their own culture.
I think they should have been their own
enough
culture.
Ent cards that they could, I think, hold up their own, and then it would only require a small adjustment to a few cards that are supposed to be compatible with them, and so you could change it so that it works with Ents, or just change that to a Fangorn card or make a copy of it or something. But yeah,
it's really just a wizard is never late, right?
And yeah, someone was talking about that too, where the combination of using this with Ents makes the whole thing very consistent and allows you to filter your deck down quite a bit.
Because you can Saved by the Fire Gandalf, grab 3 Wizard is Never Late, grab 3 Ents, never think about Gandalf again, and have just a huge chunk of your deck filtered through that you don't need to worry about drawing.
Yeah,
Yeah, the filter is incredible. I mean, the most of the times I sacrifice the Ent and find as much Wizards Never Late as possible just to get them out of my deck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I often will grab Wizards Never Late and Barlaman instead of 2 Wizards Never Late, because I can exert Barlaman to get the Wizards Never Late back, and it filters 1 more card from my deck, as long as I don't have another draw that turn.
Yeah, I can't do that because I usually find the Council of the Wise, and that puts an elf ally into hand.
That's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. I have not run that combination yet.
Yeah. And I don't think I'm a good expert on all of the other PC movie decks. Most of them seem fine to me. I don't think that anything felt broken to me. I do feel that some of the strategies that you errated were completely eradicated, like
Yeah.
Corsairs, Besiegers weren't really playable anymore. It felt like because nobody was playing it, and well, I think Corsair is quite bad now. But
And
I,
this,
I used to play Corsair on high level tournaments, and it was just incredibly powerful. So I understand why the choices were made.
and this kind of gets into the errata philosophy question, but one of the things that I've tried to make it my goal to do with PC Movie is not just balancing PC Movie on the level that we've always known Movie to be at, but to try and reel in the power creep for the whole format as a whole, and try to bring everything and down and undo some of the damage that set 8 and set 10 and partially set 9 did to making cards wildly more powerful than they were before. If we could bring things down to about a set 7-ish power level, I think that gives us more wiggle room in the future. Because if we're introducing more V cards, for people to want to use those V cards, they have to be viable. And for them to be viable, that means that they have to be either competitive or better than the existing crop of cards that's out there. Which means that if we are stuck at the PC Movie level, then our only option is to make, at the Decipher Movie power level, then our only option is to release cards that are at the same level of brokenness or higher, and that just leads eventually to expanded. Like that is precisely the problem that they ran into. They weren't able to edit anything that they had done, so all they could do was stack on top of it. And that I don't want to end up with the PC formats eventually, a few years from now, being in that position of just being expanded version 2. And
Agreed.
honestly, you can see that problem occur with, I believe the Star Wars guys ran into that problem with their players committee, where they had a whole bunch of cards that eventually just got out of control, and it was so broken to the point where they decided to just undo everything and delete all of their VSATs and start over because it had just gotten to too unwieldy of a situation. So I look at all that and I think, well, the only option then, if we are going to assume that errata is one of the tools in our toolbox, the only true answer to all these problems is to bring the power level down. We have to make these decks worse. And now, I don't think that we have done so evenly like we should. I think that what we need to do is make sure that all of the decks have been reduced in power level, so that we're no longer at a level where, because Castamere is out there and because Grand is out there and because Lady Redeemed is out there, that is the power level we have to deal with. We were too uneven, and so now we just need to. I think we just need to keep pushing forward and knock down the ones that are currently up there. Ents are on top. Elves and Men are on top. Knights didn't have too much of a showing during the top 8, but they did have a big showing during the group stage, and maybe they need to get knocked down as well. But if we're going to have a future, we need to level it all down and get it to a point where it's even possible for us to introduce new stuff that's interesting and powerful without being, way off in the clouds.
It also keeps things fresh by just getting some cards out of the way. So I think it's a good thing that you're doing that. But it's hard to see what will happen if you punish the best strategies. What will emerge out of that area? But that's the fun of it, I think.
Mm-hmm. And to be honest, like I come a lot from video game mentality as like competitive multiplayer video games, as opposed to balancing this like a CCG. So like I come from StarCraft 2 and Dota 2 and other places where every so often you just come in with these big patch notes that rearrange the whole meta and say that, okay, we're going to change half of all the strategies that are out there. So all the broken ones are going to get knocked down and all the really busted ones that nobody could make work are now lifted up. And I think that kind of mentality is a little more accessible to us than it ever was before in the game's history. And while it is a little bit foreign to the concept of a CCG where people are used to having the same cards everywhere, the only alternative that anybody has come up with is rotation. And nobody likes rotation. They just put up with it, you know?
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
yeah. Anyway, what you were saying
I
something,
like
Mark?
a lot of the cards that you have on screen right now, I have seen in play. Also, you try to make new strategies work with tentacles or what's that? The Isengard weather mechanics, or the Aragorn mechanic, or the Gandalf with Elven Allies mechanic. It's fun to have more options.
Yeah, and Finarfin's definitely to be praised for a lot of the ideas that he put in here. I think that we did a good job with the ones that worked, especially the Sauron cards. I think they did an excellent job of bringing grind up to a level, and Sauron trackers up to a level where it was competitive without being weird about it or being too overly powerful. I also think that the Twigul stuff was very good. So that's been good to see that variety out there. To be honest, I think that Nazgul might be a little bit too good, but I don't know if that's just people swinging so hard away from Isengard that it seems like Nazgul are all we see, or what exactly is the...
I definitely think that's part of it.
Yeah.
And also, people like Nazgul, they're fun villains.
Yeah, that's true. Honestly, that's probably one of the big things that people go in and say, "Oh yeah, I want to play the Witch King. Why not?" And
well, I think too, especially in Fellowship Block, like Nazgul have always been strong. They just haven't been strong in a way that is just like, oh well, this is completely meta defining, like you saw with Savagery to match their numbers before the change.
And I think, to be honest, that the reason why they never took off was because very quickly people realized that the Last Alliance concept was the one to go for, and Last Alliance just takes a dump on Nazgul. They do not care.
That's true.
They will have the tools that they need to survive to Site 3, and then after Site 3, Nazgul really drop off. And by the time you're at Site 5 or Site 7 and you finally have a lot of Twilight to use to get out more than 2 Nazgul, you've got an Aragorn who's strength 13 and completely wiping people off the face of the planet every time he skirmishes. And by then it's too late and you just can't do anything. If they weren't already in a dominant place right now, I would actually want to look at buffing Beauty is Fading, because these sorts of cards that are supposed to be Nazgul's answer are just a joke.
Honestly, just make it cost 3.
Yeah,
and
like
I think
5 is ridiculous. You mean I want to do this instead of playing a Nazgul? Like that's, yeesh.
Or leave it as 5 and have its cost go down based on how many Nazgul you exert.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Exert X Nazgul.
Give
its
it
cost
toil.
is lower.
Just straight up give it toil and tick off a bunch of people. Yeah, I would totally be down for that, to be honest. But it would probably be a bad idea.
Should be around, and it's just too expensive.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't do it now at the moment just because of the context, because Nazgul are already really powerful, and honestly, we need to have a few more answers in the other direction. I think we do have that change to Not Feared in Sunlight, but that's just one culture. So I'm wondering if there's others that need to happen. But
well, I think to some extent. So I know this is my high horse today, but with looking at cards for Errata for the next year, one of the big things that Tunid and I have talked about is, of course, there's still things that are overbearing. Like, I'm not discounting that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of cards that are right on that verge of being playable, but not quite. And it's an area we want to look at, because I think those are the cards that are largely stopping some of these decks from being worthwhile.
And I'm totally down for doing a bunch of errata that are just buffs. Like we did a lot of that with, like, for instance, the dwarves, where we boosted up gave them all a +1 strength boost, and that really helped.
Right.
Their
well, and it's that kind of thing that we've talked about really looking at. I'm not talking about like trying to fully rework light-footedness. I'm talking about the cards that have, that they're in that like 30 to 40% win rate. They're in a low play rate, but not unplayed.
Mm-hmm.
Get those more into the meta. Not trying to make them dominate. We're not trying to choose any cards that are going to be the new things we see all the time, but just see which ones have some reasonable levers to bring up just a little bit.
Yeah, things just like Beauty is Fading, where it's just like, okay, there's just one
right.
thing clearly holding it back, so let's,
Yeah, now you're right. That might not be one that's worth touching because of where Nazgul are at the moment. But if Beauty was Fading, was a Warg event, for example, that could be a really good place to start looking. Like, this card's not bad. It's just not played because it's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of cards like that. Because sure, there's some super duds. Decipher was not perfect in that matter, but a lot of what they did, there's plenty of cards out there that we want to run some numbers on and kind of programmatically get a feel for, and then have a conversation about, because it's not always a bad card because the card is bad. It's often a bad card because the whole situation is bad.
Yeah.
But
and that's something I still need to get on too. I have a bunch of code from Phelan to set up, and I just haven't had the time to look at it. I'm still trying to juggle all the prizes for the World Championship. I have all but one of them behind me now, and I just need to get them in a box and get some of them sent out. So yeah, there's just a lot of things holding me back from getting that up. But too many things to do.
And ultimately, there's a ton of stuff that we keep talking about wanting to do, and there's only so many people who are willing to commit. I think a lot of people are willing to have a conversation, but whenever we post, whenever you post, like, here's a list of cards we're talking about this errata for, there's lots of people happy to jump in and talk about it.
And that's why I take that tack, is because people will they will definitely speak up if they're like, whoa, you're about to do this, how could you do that? But right. if I go around and ask, hey, does anybody have any ideas, people just kind of shrug, right, and don't. So I kind of have to be that insider and say, hey, if you don't stop me, I'm going to do this, so give me a good reason not to. And it does make me a bit antagonistic, unfortunately, but sometimes that's...
Use a system for people designing their own cards.
Mm-hmm.
I've helped design the Goblin Runner, and I'm quite excited on getting it for real. So maybe that might be an extreme, but there might be a more intensive for players to help designing cards if there's something else attached to it.
Yeah, that was actually something that came up. Somebody suggested giving like a slot to V2 for one of the prizes that we handed out. And honestly, I'm not opposed to the idea. I think
it needs to have some strings attached.
Well, not just that, but I'm almost also kind of the opinion that if you've got a cool card idea, just come and tell us. Like, you don't have to win a tournament to get to a point where we can put it in.
Well, there's a whole channel in the Discord about that, but it's almost exclusively you posting ideas there.
And it's not just me. I am glad that people go in there and throw stuff into that Dream Cards channel, but I think people also just kind of take it as unseriously as... Well, honestly, I think that there's a historical part to it, right? For a very, very long time, people would really have to only put idle thoughts that were not going to go anywhere, because Decipher's forums didn't let you post things that were graphical. The last Homely House didn't let you post actual images. So you kind of had to know going in that, hey, this card isn't ever going to see the light of day. I just had fun designing it. But that's not the world we live in anymore. We can make these cards. We can put them up. Like, we're not even the first fan set that has been put on a GEM. We're like the third or fourth. We're just, one of the more popular compared to how those other ones ended up. But so I just need people to understand that, hey, like, this is a whole new world. We can go and add stuff. We're trying to get momentum on our official PC sets. There's some things I want to do. I want to have a Scouring of the Shire set. I want to have things that really push the envelope on what the stories that we're telling in with this game within the engine are. But we're just not quite at that point. But if people are excited about cards that might be put in, like, come talk with us. Like, let's get stuff out there. It's not a situation where you have to keep things hidden anymore. We will just let's talk and get it balanced and get it out there.
That sounds good. I think that if people actually come up with ideas and maybe just make a celebratory moment out of it. Look, this and this made this card, and we've put it in our set, and this and this made this card, and we've put it in our set. So maybe make it a little bit more visible.
That's a really good idea. Highlighting more how somebody was involved in an idea and how then it got made, versus just kind of it being included in the list. I mean, obviously, like Therafin is making lots and lots of these things and has been doing a great job, but I'm sure that whomever in these chats has given some of those ideas. Not a bad idea to highlight that a little bit.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. On the other hand, I think most people, but I'm not sure about that, just play a bit on the side, on and off. Don't have dedicated time for playing a lot and testing everything and just trying to design everything. It's
That's
quite
true.
a big time component to it.
Yeah, the game already takes a lot of time just to play and master, and to be honest, designing cards and such kind of becomes the hobby you're doing, if you're going to spend time on that. Because yeah, like it's time consuming for sure.
I think it's really easy to kind of try to put forward something when you're playing a particular deck.
Yeah.
Being like, what would really help? What one of my big problems is, coming up with stuff that kind of fills those gaps. And obviously, I mean, getting the balance right is a problem. But it's a lot harder to look at the play space as a whole.
Yeah.
You want to make pipes more competitive in movie. I'm the guy to talk to. But if you want to know how all of the shadows work together so that we can get more variety and balance amongst, I'm gonna have a much harder time there. I don't play so much movie.
Right.
That's a much larger ask, I think, and I think ultimately, I mean, Ketura, you and Ferrithin with the V sets, and I think Tunedin's been part of these as well. I'm not trying to leave anybody out, but I've done a really good job. But when not talking about one or two cards that would really help one or two strategies, it's hard to have that view.
Yeah,
I'm wondering if these tournaments leading up to the World Championship and the World Championship itself delivered a lot of data on what is actually good, or maybe too good, or what is not good enough.
That's what I'm hoping. We lost our guy that was the one that did all the stat analysis, and so we don't have any up to date stuff. I mean, obviously the replays are all sitting there ready to be analyzed, but I need to incorporate that code into GEMP and get it set up so that we have these reports again. Because yeah, I'm very curious myself to see what the trends are. Some of them are obvious, of course. Which decks just aren't being played anymore. But in other cases, yeah, I would really like to know: is a particular card dominant, or is it just being played a lot and it's just equally losing as much as it's winning, and people just haven't realized yet that their win rate is trash? It's.
I've been putzing with some logic for that.
I have a big old script from Phelan. He's got it all set up. I just need to integrate it. And
what language?
It's in Python. Which I can transfer it into Java or whatever. It's
sure, yeah.
That's not the hard part. I just need to actually have the time to sit down and focus on just that.
Well, that's the hard part. Yeah. I was gonna say I started working on a bit of Node to try to get some of these stats early this summer, but then I moved and then I changed position at work, and it hasn't gone very far.
Yeah, I'm hoping here over the holidays
Python
that I'll have,
but that's going to take me just as much time as writing it myself, I suspect.
Yeah.
Because getting that kind of data, I think some folks have rightfully said that data should not be all we go off of. But having that information, I think, is still really, really useful to be able to start having those conversations.
I can understand that mentality that just because a card is popular does not mean that it is automatically a problem.
Well, but things like high win rate doesn't necessarily mean it's a problem either. We were talking earlier today. Elrond, Envilia, and Secret Sentinels kind of together are a problem, right? It's everywhere. It's super strong. That's just known. But we can't look at them each individually because Secret Sentinels, say, has the highest win rate. and go, well, this is the card that needs to be touched, because in reality it's this set of things.
And I
I think that's the
I
argument
definitely
that's
do think that
often...
nuance like that does need to be brought to the table. But at the same time, if we've got our numbers set up properly, it seems to me that should be that sort of relationship should be reflected. Ideally, we have the ability to look at clusters of cards and say what cards in combination have a higher win rate than when they're played separately. But another thing too is that I feel like because of the way that competitiveness works, you're never going to end up with a situation where you have cards that are that don't work all that well on their own, but are only used in combination, and have that reflected properly, because people just aren't going to play it at all if it doesn't work on its own in these competitive events. So you're I don't know. I feel like you're just going to end up with a null situation where there's no data on what Secret Sentinels does on its own, because who the heck plays Secret Sentinels without Elrond? And
right, but it's one of those things, like we were talking earlier, like you could change Secret Sentinels by just being exert a second elf, and that's the kind of thing that you don't see in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Kind of, is it a problem because Elrond is so common? Does making Elrond weaker take care of the Secret Sentinels problem? Because I think some of this happened with the elves, right? Like elves were viewed as super strong and kind of NPE, and so we touched a lot of them. And I don't think that was wrong in what we were looking at, but I think I don't think I'm out of line by saying I think maybe we went too far. They're not really being played lately. They should make a showing at Worlds at all. Maybe we should have taken a step back instead of looking at the 5 cards that are talked about. Been like, what tiny touches need here so that everything kind of comes down a little.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that it's not those cards, but looking at them, we touched Galadriel and Glorfindel, and Vilya, though that one may or may not have made much of a difference.
Yeah, the Vilya one
Also,
was kind of botched.
Draws cards.
But, kind of, if we'd looked at those more as a picture of this particular deck or this combination of things, and I'm not saying we aren't doing any of this or we haven't done any of this, only that more of that is good.
Right.
Try to get the
and
whole...
I think the reason why I always go back to the win rates is that, imagine if you have, like, maybe this will be easier if I have a diagram out, but like if you have a whole bunch of different elf decks and they all have things about them that are different from the meta version that everybody uses, but you have just a few cards that are shared among all those decks, and those are the cards that people keep going back to, these linchpins. I think that kind of is a reflection of really what the problem may be. Oops. So for instance, if you have, come on. So if you have, oh come on, so if you have a deck that covers a certain number of cards, and you have another deck that covers a certain number of cards, and then you have a third deck that is doing weird things, right? It's going to be the thing that's here in the middle. Come on. It's going to be that overlap there, right? That is the cards that are going to have those high win rates. If these are the things that are carrying all these different kinds of decks and the different things that are being included in them, that's why I focus on them, because it seems like, well, if Glorfindel is really the thing that makes it the difference, and all these other trash things that you included didn't matter, I mean, that's why I keep going back to the win rate, that even though it may not obviously appear to be a problem on its own, the fact that it has a good win rate has to be an indication that it is propping up a lot of decks by itself.
Sure.
But
yeah, no, I don't think that that's something that we should stop looking at.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of pieces to all of these pictures, I think.
And I do think that, we do have to be smart about it. Like, for instance, if you were to look at the inclusion rate of the different rings, you would be barking up the wrong tree, because you are forced to have a ring, and there's only like 6 different options. So of course, these cards are going to be included in 10,000 decks, and that's not necessarily a problem in and of itself. Although,
and I think things like, if you look at, rings is a good example. You can only really look at the rings in relation to each other, right?
right, yeah, you obviously
Now,
can't compare a ring to a site's win rate or something because it's just a
right,
completely different context.
if one of those rings is used 90% of the time, then maybe that one is too good.
And actually,
Uh,
that's actually kind of the thinking that I've had around that maybe we need to errata the ruling ring and give it a different ability because
I have wondered that too.
yeah, because nobody uses that. Obviously, that's just kind of the baby version that you get in every starter deck, and it's trash. You
Right.
replace it as
Well,
soon as you can.
Because it's the common one, right? Like in Fellowship, there is the rare deck where what you're worried about is corruption, where maybe it's better than a Sealder's Bane.
Mhm.
But as soon as you get to movie, the
Oh,
either you want to
answering all
fetch
riddles
rings
is
or you want.
yeah.
Yeah. I can never remember the names. I think of them as the water ring and the grass ring, but
Yeah.
like those are gonna be better than the ruling ring, depending on what your build is. They just are.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't looked at the stats for the rings compared to each other, but I suspect the ruling ring is, if not low win rate, very low play rate.
I'm sorry. Say that again. I was distracted by a chat.
I was saying I would suspect that the stats for the ruling ring, I would bet it has a lower win rate, but I definitely think it has a lower play rate than the others.
Oh, for sure. And in fact, we could probably even pull that up.
But a change like that needs to be done really carefully, because I do think you need to be careful about balancing it against just a Sealder's Bane in Fellowship.
So here's the spreadsheet that was made by what was his name? Stormborn Slade, who did the initial round of analysis for us. And so this is a spreadsheet where I took the all the cards that were in movie and tried to come up with a formula that would balance inclusion rate and win rate against each other, so that and then gave them a priority that would allow us to sort it and try to see, well, which cards are a problem. And so at the top, you'll see all the usual suspects. You find yourself with Shotgun and Quaya, Samson of Hamfast, Legolas Greenleaf, Errol to Gilgalad, all these things that are like, okay, we know this. Like this is very obvious. As well as some interesting like less obvious candidates. Things like Dwarven Axe and stuff kind of show up and you're like, huh, well that's interesting.
Yeah.
But being able to come in here and say something like this is really what I'm looking for. But anyway, so ruling ring. Where are you? Ruling ring does not get used in movie?
That can't be right.
That might be right.
Oh, there it is.
Because it's used over here in Fellowship. It's got a 39%, okay, so 17,000 games out of 182,000 in Fellowship with a 40% win rate. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me that in casual constructed matches, nobody intentionally goes, huh, you know what? The ruling ring is something I want to play. That's just not how it works.
Yeah, I only ever even consider it if I know I don't have anything to deal with burdens. Even then, it usually ends up getting swapped out for a Sealder's Bane.
I maybe have an idea to make it a bit better. What if you play this ring, you remove one burden from the starting bid that you made, or something like that. Then you will play with the worst ring, but you will be able to bid higher.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Which is
I can see something like, add a burden to put it on. Each time you would take one or more wounds, you take one burden instead. Kind of convert those multi-burden hits into a single burden.
That would make it a fighting Frodo.
But also just good against the Twilight Witch King.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to see a ring that actually tempts you. Something that makes you strength +1 per burden that you have, or something,
Mm-hmm.
and makes you like actually consider riding that line and how many burdens can I stomach.
I could see that. If you have a burden, strength +1. If you have 3 burdens, strength +2. If you have 6 burdens, strength +3.
Oh, I would just say +1 per. Go for it.
Just make
wanna...
Frodo huge.
Sure, yeah. You got 10 burdens on him, or you've got +10 strength. Yeah, he's doing great, and he's also sweating that there's nobody that's going to add 2 burdens and win the game. Like I think that's an interesting dynamic. But
yeah, he just punched out the cave troll. But oh man, are we nervous about?
You feeling a little evil over there, Frodo? I'm kind of nervous about you. But so yeah, so answered all riddles. I finally got pulled up. I realized I had a filter for just fellowship cards. Yeah, so it has an exactly 50% win rate, but an enormous inclusion rate, obviously, because it's the ring to go for. And the reason for that is because it's used everywhere and on both sides, and it's always going to be there. So it both wins and loses practically every match.
Right. I think that's a great example of like, well, this maybe should take a hit, or the other should get a leg up somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know which one of those is the right answer, because I don't have a simple, obvious way of tweaking the answer to all riddles without really changing its power level.
So here's a grand sorted list. And again, this is regular Decipher movie, which is not 100% the same as PC movie, which is obviously a big problem, a big caveat. But when you sort everything by the priority list that I came up with that tries to do a good job of taking into account how many games the game has been in and also the win rate. So it biases towards high win rate cards that have been played a lot. You see all the usual suspects up here. Sam, Glorfindel, Grond, Captured by the Ring, not so much.
I'm surprised to see Captured by the Ring on that list.
And that's one of those weird dark horses. It's like, so it's got a 55% win rate and gets used a lot because people use it to add threats and they use it to recycle their golems. That's an interesting one. Nobody complains about that card. So I'm not sure that it
I wonder if it's just because Golem, kind of like Shotgun and Kaya, is just so useful in so many places, and Captured by the Ring just makes more sense than running more copies of Golem.
Right, yeah. Ithelstone, however, is also up here, 57% win rate, and included in quite a few decks. Great hill troll.
That doesn't surprise me, but I suspect that goes very hand in hand with Grond being 2 places up.
Yeah. So
it's the same
besiegers.
Deck that those things are
in regular movie, besiegers are everywhere because they're the only culture that can stand up to elves, and so you're kind of locked into the situation where there are other options. You have Corsairs that are also powerful enough. But because you have such powerhouses running around, you're not allowed to use a deck unless it is powerful enough to also punch back. So you're kind of that's kind of the same problem with the power creep issue, is that now something that's lesser powered is just going to get completely destroyed. But then,
also Darkness is one of the best cards.
I was just like, I can't remember what Stand Against Darkness is. Which card is that?
It's 6 places below your. It's at number 20, 20th row.
Exert an elf to discard a Sauron minion, condition, or possession. So you can use it to nuke Grond. You can use it to nuke a Great Hill Troll. Basically, you can use it to destroy this Gorgoth Soldier if you really needed to. Like any of those.
And I've got to think that that's so high on this list because Besiegers are the shadow.
Right. And Besiegers are the shadow because elves are the fellowship. And so it's kind of this weird situation where those are the 2 big linchpins, and then you just have others that kind of are able to also punch, but they're not the top tier 1 options.
Right. But I think Stand Against Darkness is a great example here where I don't think Stand Against Darkness is busted because it's a dead card in most decks if shadows are played fairly evenly. If we looked at this list and went, well, we got to nerf Stand Against Darkness, I think that's the kind of thing that starts being a mistake based purely on stats without the bigger picture.
Right. And that does
it's
kind of make
really
sense.
good against Red Orcs, but it's useless against Moria or Isengard or Nazgul, any of the Raiders.
And to be honest,
it's
though,
a great tech card.
even in that situation, though, maybe not from a game balance standpoint, but from a game design standpoint, having a card that only works in this situation and in no others, you can't cycle it out, and it's intended to be a silver bullet. Those silver bullet concepts are kind of dumb, to be honest. Like it only works in this situation because it's a silver bullet against the thing that everybody's playing, and so that's why it gets used a lot. So maybe that's just kind of an indication that maybe it ought to be changed so it's not a silver bullet. That yeah, it has a bonus against Sauron, but it's not like so incredibly dumpstery on any super powerful Sauron card.
Of like we were talking about the silver bullets earlier, I could see it getting adjusted for kind of its playability reasons, but I don't think it needs to be nerfed because it's too good, even though it's in the top 20 on this list.
Right. At the same time, though, I look at this and it's like, okay, there's this many cards that should probably be addressed before Stand Against Darkness, and unfortunately, some of these are big ones that are kind of tricky to touch. I mean, Legolas Greenleaf is of course used in everything. Where's the Inquia? He must have dropped right there.
Right above Greenleaf. Inkea is one that I don't know if it's a popular opinion or not, but I don't think Inkea is in a bad place.
And honestly, I don't. So my problem with Inkea is that there's not alternatives to Inkea so much. And there's going to be people like Phelan Cassidy that hear this and they're going to say, what are you talking about? Of course there are alternatives. But there are not alternatives that are spoken of in the same breath, right? Like,
right.
And so I think Inkea's problem is not so much that he does what he does. It's that there's not more cards that do something similar. Like Inkea, for instance, is useful against six-sized companions, but it's also useful in situations where you are trying to add burdens, right? So you've got that secondary usage of him that sometimes does actually come into play. And nobody else really has a version that is that equally useful in two situations, where somebody who's playing a Moria deck says, "Oh yeah, I want the Moria version of Inquia, not the standard version of Inquia." And so to fix Inquia, I think properly, we actually need to introduce more cards or errata.
And I agree. I absolutely think more things that do similar stuff that fill that gap in other decks that work better makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But I don't think Inkea should be brought down because it's too popular, too common.
Well, so
I think that kind of card is actually really important for defining the meta in various ways.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that Greenleaf, because it's a thing that's always on the board as opposed to a threat,
right,
is maybe not.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. I would only ever consider erratating Inquia, and I would only consider doing so in a way that added like cultural enforcement or something after there were a bunch of other options that you could use instead of that. And that was kind of my thinking behind Sam as well. Like we couldn't really bring the hammer down on Sam until we had other options for burdens, because most cultures just don't have any options. And so if you don't have options, then you are basically saying, okay, unless you are Shire or Gandalf or Elf, you are not allowed to play a game where, or in any format where corruption is a factor, because this was your only option and we just yanked it out from underneath you. So, we introduced the Gondor version, and we had an errata for one of the Rohan cards as well. So like giving other cultures the ability to access these things was an important step that we could not just errata in a vacuum.
Yep, no, and that makes sense. I personally do like that the Nazgul show up lots of places. I really am saddened by the PC nerf of Nertia. Not because, like, I get the cultural enforcement thing for every faction except Nazgul, because in my mind, there's always a Nazgul somewhere nearby. You have the ring and they're chasing it. They might not be there in force. They might not have the boss with them, but there's one coming for you. And I really love that thematically. I actually wish there was more good Splash Nazgul minions. Because I think that's really,
if I'm being
fluffy.
honest, I feel like that's one of the aspects of the game that was a problem as time went on, was that they moved away from having any kind of cross-cultural splash as much as possible. And on the one hand, I understand it when people say that, well, if everything is splashable, then what you end up with is a bunch of decks that are made up of nothing but the most powerful splashes, and I get that. But I also think that we've gone too far in the other direction. I mean, you look at Expanded, and it's all mono all the time. So, like, clearly, like, it gets to a certain point where everything has been everything rainbow has been completely erased, and in even in movie, like, you have elf man that happens, and occasionally you have like Shire Ent maybe, but most of the time it's just pure mono one way or the other, with maybe a different Frodo because your particular culture is trash at actually removing burdens. But
Right.
So-
Gandalf is sometimes a 5-card splash, but that's
true, yeah. But so it offends me a little bit to have a story that was about all the different kinds of the Free Peoples coming together.
only to have them only work
Only
with their own
now,
kind.
yeah. Like Decipher sits down and says, "Okay, actually, having a Rainbow Fellowship is a bad thing," and it's like, okay, come on, like you have to work with that a little bit at least.
Yeah. Well, I think some of that is there's a bunch of anti-Rainbow Fellowship cards that, if they kick off, are really problematic.
Yeah, and I think
I
it's
mean,
just
like,
that
Grima just sends them back.
and yeah, that's. I think that was what killed it, was that they were like, okay, this is a problem, so we're going to introduce yet again a silver bullet for this specific situation, and they made the silver bullet so good that it permanently altered the trajectory of the game. Grima is another one that he's not on this list hardly anywhere, I don't think, because he has so greatly impacted everything that
Right,
he's way down here at number 170. Like,
You don't need to run him.
yeah,
when
you don't
you're
have to.
already
People
always
are
building
afraid
against
of-
him.
Yeah. So, like, that's actually one card that I would consider errata-ing in spite of the win rate is still huge, 57%, but he's not included hardly at all because you don't have to, because people assume that you have it.
Well, and I think there is a real distinction there. Like, Grima is a card that if he kicks off, he might win you the turn, he might win you the game.
Oh yeah, you put Durin
whereas-
away when he's got 8 things on him. Yeah, you just straight up won. Like,
Right. But, like, Ankea, as a highly splashed everywhere card, is meta defining, but only so far. Like, I don't worry about. I do worry oftentimes. I'll play my 6th companion, hoping they don't have Ankea right now, so I can kill one off. I don't need Pippin anymore, but I don't want to hold on to Boromir for another turn.
right.
And you're kind of crossing your fingers and you're praying and you're seeing if it happens and you're adjusting as you go. Or you have a wide fellowship that doesn't care about any given companion. And you go, yeah, I'm going to run 9 companions, and Ankea is probably going to kill 2 of them throughout the game. That's just going to be okay. Like, you can't do that with Grima because your hand gets clogged. Now you can't play your shadow.
Yeah.
There's definite differences in kind of how they adjust things, because you do still see wide fellowships. You do still see decks that don't have a lot of burden removal or bid high, and pray that they're not facing corruption. Ankea doesn't stop those. It does make you think about it.
Right.
You can't play a deck built around Boromir with 6 companions because Ankea's out there.
And honestly, I think that's kind of the impact that he has, is that you really have to move away from hero-based fellowships. That okay, I'm
Right.
gonna have this one dude that is going to be my super linchpin, because if you do that and you play your cards wrong, then Ankea is going to come down and yank that guy off from underneath you. So yeah, I think that it does have that pressure, like you say, towards other alternatives that do not rely on hero individuals.
Well, but it doesn't stop you from playing heroes. It stops you from playing heroes and a big fellowship.
I suppose that's true. Yeah.
Ankea doesn't. You don't care at all about Ankea if you're running Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, with Frodo getting carried along. Like, you got your 4 heroes, they're going down the path. Gandalf's exerting to make everybody bigger. Aragorn's chopping Nazgul in half. Gimli's taking on the cave troll one-on-one. You're fine. Ankea shows up and he's just going to get his ass kicked.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't add Pippin to that deck.
Right.
And I think that's okay. I think it's okay to say, hey, you can play really strong, really important key companions, or you can play, the Giant Fellowship, because those are both good against different strategies. But you don't lose because one card exists in the game.
Right.
Whereas
Not like
Wormtongue can be a
yeah.
huge problem with getting your hand clogged. And there's 2 of them, right? One of them is if you have more than 3 items, and one of them is if you have more than 3 cultures.
Yeah, so it's 2 different silver
There's
bullets.
no-
Yeah.
there's even another layer to this, because if you play a Grima, both of them in a deck with Golem and Evil Smelling Fence, you can get them back. And also you could also play Ceremon Power, which is also a bullet to, well, destroy whole Fellowship strategies.
Yep, run 1 copy of Sorman's Power, 2 copies of Grima, and
And people
one of
did
each
that.
even maybe.
That was
Yeah,
in
for
a
sure.
number of these decks. Like it was.
I know I didn't make it, but my group stage deck had 1 copy of each Grima in it.
Yeah, so
I
two of
wasn't
the
sure
top
what I was
eights
going to
had it,
face, and I
but-
wanted those ready to go.
Yeah, that exact situation was used. In fact, the Faker's deck. So his deck that beat everybody, but basmelis, in fact had that exact situation. So like it's, I guess he only had the 1 Grima instead of both Grimas, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, you don't even need to bother bringing the multiple Fellowship one, because who on earth is going to be trying to run a rainbow? Like the most you're going to have is Elfman, and
Well, I think that's so sad because there's so many good rainbow decks that you want to build, but you go, I can't put in a 4th culture. I didn't have hobbits in my pipes-based movie deck because Grima would have wrecked it.
yeah.
I also didn't have a Greenleaf Splash, though that one's probably okay because
Yeah.
But
yeah, so to that point, I do understand how there are some situations like that where Grima is not going to be reflected in this list. And so there are problems that this sort of list does not highlight. On the other hand, there are sorts of problems that are very well highlighted by this. But like nobody's surprised by most of these, right? These are all very well understood cards. Tail of the Great Ring is a little bit of a surprise, but that's only because I think it feels like a high level card where people.
Yeah, I don't feel like all of these cards jump out at me as being cards that like if I see I hate, but I understand why they're all here.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually not sure what Rohirrim Road is. I don't remember which
Road.
one that is.
So we actually did give that one an errata. Rohirrim Road is the one that honestly may have been one of the reasons why we haven't seen as much elves as well. Because in King Block, it's exert an elf to make the twilight cost of each condition in possession +2 until the end of the turn. And actually, this would have hurt Dauntless Hunter as well. So yeah, you get this, and they're not playing anything to set up for the first 2 rounds, right?
And it's not limited.
No.
If you start Galadriel and Glorfindel, you can exert and make conditions, +6
+4
cost
or something, yeah, and make it so that. But I mean, obviously, past a certain point, it's obviously a bit much. But
diminishing
yeah,
returns.
you are basically able to say you are not allowed to play any of these support like cards until I get to Site 4, and I'm elves, so I have access to all these tools anyway to tear them down once you do play.
Take care of
them. So
them,
yeah, it was crazy. So the PC errata actually did a twofer on this one and transferred its ability basically to Rohan. So instead of elves having access to it, now Rohan does. And nobody's used it for that I understand, but that's because Rohan's still kind of in a situation that's not really playable, but or not competitive, at least I should say.
Okay.
But
it makes more sense for it to be Rohan. I mean, just thematically, it is their road.
Right.
Right.
But yeah, elves have no business having
that's
that.
Down. There's no elf. There's no reason thematically to have any site be elf friendly in a King, right? Like Legolas is the only elf in that entire book, isn't he? Does Arwen show up? Maybe.
No, well, so in the actual book, there's more elves that show up as part of the Grey Company, but that got cut from the movies. So yeah, you're basically Legolas and nothing else. Anyway, so yeah, I don't want to slavishly hold to this and look at nothing else, but at the same time, like a lot of these are problems, and so it seems obvious to me that if we can have a checklist that tells us, hey, these are all the cards that probably need to get evaluated. At the very least, we need to look at them and come up with a reason not to. If we look at this and say, okay, the numbers are just wrong in this situation, or addressing that would not improve the game, it would make it worse, then that makes sense. But at the same time, like this is also not vibes based at all. And I prefer having something that, because everybody has their own pet peeve, and there's always these suspicions too. Sometimes when somebody comes in with an errata that they are really gunning for, it's kind of like, well, are you just trying to make your deck
Gondorian
work?
Shield.
Right, and so I'm actually willing to throw that in now. Now that there's no risk of, okay, well, there's just a secret deck that is going to blow into the stratosphere. But like I don't like having that sort of like asterisk next to anybody that's like that's complaining about a card. Like even Galadriel Lady Redeemed, people complain about her far out of proportion to her actual impact.
I don't think it's because she's too good. I think it's because she's not fun.
True, yeah, and that's
Like,
that's the other thing too, is that this does not track fun, and so we
Right.
have to bring that element to the table ourselves and be like, well, okay, it is a powerful card, but if we remove this, does this make it more fun or less fun? And that's got to be
Yeah,
one of the things that we're balancing, as well as actual balance.
Yeah, for sure. Like, Galadriel's problem is
Well,
not that holy crap she's overtuned. It's that
Well, the thing with related redeemed is that people start playing different type of strategies because the thing that she destroys is apparently not fun to play anymore.
right.
So
Yeah.
she might not be good enough because the strategies that she's good against don't get played anymore, which is the same reason why Grima is not a fun card.
Yep. Yeah, I'm a big proponent that I think every card in the game should be playable. And I don't mean we're going to get that done tomorrow or next year. But I think that cards that make other cards unplayable, or cards that are so bad that there's just no reason to include them, are really worth looking at in addition to the cards that are kind of dominating everything.
Right.
And like literally, if just if there's two Gondor buffs and one makes a Gondor man strength +3 and one makes them strength +2 or strength +3 sometimes, the second one needs to be better. Like, because why does it exist if there's something that's just always better? That kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of that, just as some of them were mistakes by Decipher, they were always bad. Some replaced by something better over time.
So there's
and I
this
think-
giant middle section here of the list that always annoys me, that this is the sort of thing that can happen. Now, some of these zero cost ones are ones that have either been banned or are not legal to use, like Fellowship site cards. But if you look beyond that to a lot of the ones that have single digit inclusions, like they're just trash cards. And I understand why CCGs have trash cards, because that's just kind of part of the business model, but we're not a business. So like
Right.
I would, just to your point, I would very much like to go in and try to make it so that if we could make it so that 75% of the cards that exist are actually viable to use in a deck, that would be a way superior situation to be in, I think.
Well, and some of these, you've got Risk a Little Light is thematically one of my favorite cards in the game. But when Aaron was talking earlier, he really highlighted this. He didn't mention Risk a Little Light, but he talked about how good and useful Two Eyes as often as I can spare them is, because it's just a better Risk a Little Light.
Mm-hmm.
I can look at the top two cards, grab one of them, discard the other, but I can only do it if I don't have a lot of Twilight. It's going to cost me Twilight to do it. And one of them's going to the discard pile, and maybe I really wanted both. Two Eyes as often as I can spare him is, if Frodo's healthy, simply a draw 4.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it was a bad addition to the game. I think that's really a good card that is worthwhile, but I'd love to see Risk a Little Light get adjusted a bit so that it's playable.
Yeah, so that it's comparable.
Because it's a great card. It doesn't need to be a draw 4. Maybe it's look at more cards and pick the one that's important and then shuffle the rest back in. One in hand, one in the discard pile, two that go, on the top or bottom or shuffled, or I don't know, something along those lines, to make it more of a, I'm looking for Aragorn. I need to draw Aragorn. Not, all right, I need lots of cards in my hand. Because there should be a place for cards like this. And so often there just aren't.
And part of it is just
there's
down
another
to,
card that's just like this. I can't even remember the name of it, but I think it's 3 cost, and it does the same thing. But it's look at the top 4, take 2 into hand, discard 2.
Questions that need answering. Yeah, it's the exact same card, but
that sounds right. Yeah. And it's the same idea. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with having 2 versions of this. A big one and a little one. But just neither of them are good enough to see play most of the time.
You say that, but it's an event. and to take up a whole slot in your deck and in your hand, and for you to need to hold onto it until you need to use it. Events have to be punchy, and this is one of the big things that we've ran into with making cards for V1 and V2. Is it's hard to make an event that is worth playing, because that card slot is so huge. It's so much easier to put this sort of effect on a condition, because if you get it, you can plop it down, and even if you never use it again, you had the option of doing so, and it's not making you realize as you end the game that, oh crap, this thing was taking up my hand. I was playing with a 7-card hand this whole game because I was trying to hold on to this and play it at the right moment, and it just didn't work. And that was something I think that Decipher themselves had to figure out. I think that over time they did kind of trend towards events being more punchy and conditions being more subdued. But yeah, that's something that they didn't quite have hammered down or nailed down by the first set. And so if we're going to have these sorts of cards work, then we need to go in and fix them and make them more punchy, or change them to conditions. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Having a condition that's around that lets you risk it every time that you move or something.
Sure.
Like that's.
But like risk a little light, if it, and again, I'm probably going way too far here just for the example, but if it was the exact same thing, but it let you look at the top 10 cards and one of them came into hand and one of them got discarded, like now it's a really useful tutor and deck filtering tool. 10 cards might be too many. I'm not saying that's the right level, but it's not, oh geez, I hope the thing I'm looking for is on top, and the other card on top isn't something I really needed next turn.
Right. Heaven forbid that I draw like the Balrog and the Witch King or something and be like, oh great, now which one of these am I clogging my hand with and which one am I throwing away? Like.
Right. Yeah. Site 4, it's the Balrog and his whip. Like, well, but if you got to look at a good number of cards, I mean, not your whole deck, because no card should be a generic deck tutor, but 5 cards, 10 cards, something like that, and choose one. Maybe you even reveal it. I don't remember if this requires revealing. No, it doesn't. But there's a thing here that would be a really good event. It's kind of like how Wizard is Never Late is a really good event in an end deck. There's a place where a card that just goes, look at the top 10 and take a Gandalf card into hand is great, because you have enough Gandalf cards, you're always going to be useful. And now it's one that lets you help filter your deck through. Really solid. But when you can only take a total of 4 cards into hand, and there are cards like Two Eyes as often as I can spare them, or Save from the Fire in the game, it's really hard to justify risk a little light.
Right. But yeah, so like I would really like to see more of us trying to look at the middle section here and figure out, why are some of these not used, and what can we do to boost them up. And I have been using them. Oh, hang on. It looks like Skilled is trying to connect.
Ooh, awesome.
Let's see. But anyway, so one of the things that I have been doing is that when we're looking for a card to buff, or like a strategy to buff, we will sometimes look for one of these trash cards that is not used and apply it. Like for instance, that's what we did with the what was the song one for or no, Sang as They Slew. That was it. It had an awful usage rate, and so when we were looking for a burden card to do for Rohan, we threw it on there to kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. When Tu and I were talking about trying to identify cards, we talked about kind of a bunch of groups. And amongst the lower groups, there was kind of this like, is it within like a 30 to 40% win rate with a low play rate? Like, I forget what we called them, but like that feels like a sweet spot for finding cards that are like, they're not terrible, but they definitely could use some help. And maybe it's them directly, and maybe it's, they need more of a space, but like there's a lot of cards in that grouping.
And then you have light-footedness. that no one would ever.
Right. I don't have an answer for those. That's not just a different card with the same picture.
Yeah. So in these cases, it's just like, okay, sorry, we're throwing that out, and we'll just have to reuse it. I mean, that's we kind of.
I don't think that's wrong, but that stops feeling like errata and more feels like we've just phased a card out and we've reused the image and name.
That's true. And like I'm okay with this. I know that some people are
but
not.
like
they would prefer.
I
to
have
just
no
ban.
idea on how you turn this trash card into something that would get played that isn't fundamentally changing what the card is.
Yeah, like I think that in situations like this you can rescue the concept. Like, okay, if we're like not necessarily the mechanic, but if we're just looking at
but have it
elves being able to get around situations that other people can't. Like for instance, if you were to exert an elf to make a non-elf not be overwhelmed or something like something like that, you could definitely find a niche for it that matches, the title and the concept.
Yeah, you stick with it being kind of wound prevention, right? Like, right.
But yeah, like obviously, I mean, even if you were to tune it up to say, minion archer total -6, like then all you're doing is making it so that it's one of those silver bullets again that gets used in a situation where archery is big.
You could full on, the minion archers total is 0 and they can't play events or use special abilities this turn. Yeah. And it's still probably a bad card, but it now, like you said, is a problem for that Easterling archery deck or that Moria archery that wants to try to make a show. That's not a good change. It might make it playable, but at cost for other strategies. And I don't even want to look at this style of card while we have so many cards that are almost there.
True, and like, yeah, it's probably better to go for the ones that people are trying to use, like kind of like we tried to do with tentacles. People are always trying to use tentacles, so it's like, okay, well, we may as well throw them a bone. So yeah, it definitely makes more sense to.
What card are people trying to play with? What card are people experimenting with, but that ends up getting pulled out because it wasn't quite good enough? There's a lot of those. There's I don't have a spreadsheet up in front of me, and the one I did have was only from 1 month's worth of data. But there was like 100 cards that had a low play rate, but did have a 30 to 40, 30 to 50% win rate. It's like, yeah, these aren't absolute disasters. They're just not good enough to be played regularly.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we're going to touch all of those. I don't know that we should. A lot of them, you might have one card that brings them all into vogue, kind of thing. But getting and some clear examples from that
is a situation that you can't plan for. Is what if, like, so for instance, Reflections introduced a couple of cards that made certain shadow strategies suddenly work. Freka makes Dunland work in movie in a way that they couldn't really before. The Host of Moria gives Moria a fighting chance. And so I definitely understand people wanting those sorts of additions. It's just that they're hard to figure out.
Totally.
Yeah. And in some cases, like, there's some problems that can't fix. Like, there's no card that you could release that would make the original Weight of a Legacy worth including. So it's in those situations you just have to fix the card.
Yeah, and some of them are really easy. They've got a lot of levers. You can give them a small power boost by some adjustment. A boost that is, kind of in this range. It's got an okay but below 50% win rate and really low play rate. That's one of these, +2 most of the time, +4 in this instance. If it becomes +5 in that instance, maybe it, kind of those little things can really push it up.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we discover 6 months later it made no difference at all.
Yeah.
And that's, but
that's
it's
the
okay
downside,
to
I think,
attempt a boost that doesn't fix it, right? Like, you don't have to make something a power card.
Right.
We're gonna make mistakes, and it's okay to down the road be like, well, that didn't do what we were hoping for.
And that's kind of why I've always dreamed of, although we haven't really gotten to this point, and I'm not sure if we'll ever have enough people. I've always wanted to have more rapid errata responses. I would like to have monthly doses. I mean, obviously you'd have to change how you evaluate things, because you don't want to smash down a deck that has just barely started to come to prevalence, but at the same time you don't want to
introduce a change and then it takes you 6 months to realize that you did nothing. You'd like to be able to make adjustments if you discover that, okay, we didn't hit it enough. Let's boost it a little more.
I'm not sure that that's enough time to really tell the difference, though. If you make I don't even know that this is a low played card, but the ranger buff that is better against roaming minions.
Mm-hmm.
If you made that a +2/+5, in an attempt to get it to be played a little bit more, I don't know that in 1 month you're going to see much of a change, because it's a small enough change that it's not going to make people go, oh, now that deck is viable. It's a change that's designed to, as people are kind of going back and reevaluating the concept, finding that this card now has a home.
And this is a well-known phenomenon within Dota, because when you have patch notes that come out that are going to be buffing or nerfing or reworking 100 heroes at a time, things slip the cracks. And when that happens, sometimes you have a situation where there is a completely OP hero out there, but that nobody has quite figured out or realized that it's there, because they just kind of got that cached thought in their head that, yeah, that hero's trash and it's been trash for a long time. And so you end up with a situation where perception is kind of everything. And the developers have to keep giving like an attention buff to some of those heroes until someone looks around and realizes, wait a minute, this guy has been buffed 6 patches in a row. And I look at the situation that it's in right now, and it's hey, I think this is actually pretty darn good, and it probably has been for a long time. It's just that nobody's figured it out. And yeah, so we're never going to be in a situation where we put out the buffs that we want and it instantly becomes a smash hit, or we instantly errata somebody to nerf them and they are immediately banished from all cards. We're never going to have that kind of reliability. But at the same time, I do think that there's... I hate to say it, but yeah, it's a balancing act. Like, how do you figure out how quickly these sorts of things need to happen? I think that probably just from a sustainability standpoint, it makes sense for us to have patches like every 6 months. But that does also make me think that we're going to lose a little bit of reactability. But it's not like the reactability has helped us too much anyway, because I was the only person doing it, so it was I would get distracted and not come in and do it. But if there was someone else that was doing stuff every month, I would feel like that would be a best of both worlds situation. But maybe the answer is to have some kind of halfway format where it's like, okay, these are our like live testing stuff. Like, we're going to be hitting this all the time. So feel free to play in it, but just realize that it's going to be volatile until we export those changes to the real formats. Like,
I think too, kind of, I'm saying I don't think we should do changes too often, because you need to let things kind of settle. But that doesn't mean that you don't do changes all the time. It means you don't change the same group of things.
That's true.
Right? You could do a monthly change where the errata is, 2 to 4 cards each month. And if you do Gondor in January and Rohan in February, you're probably not causing an issue where you haven't let the Gondor thing settle, and now the Rohan combination with Gondor has caused a problem. I don't think you want to slightly boost. Let's just go with wargs. They're super kind of not played. I don't think you want to do a small warg buff thinking that like that might be enough for people to start playing with them. Wait 1 month and go, they're not being played with much yet, and immediately do another warg buff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to let that settle. You want to see how it affects things. Did you go too far? Did you not go far enough? Did it help but not fix the problem? But you can do a warg buff 1 month and do, Gandalf, a wizard is never late adjustments the next month. I think regular updates is okay.
So long as you
just want to let any given update and the area around it, right? Like, don't change a wizard is never late this month, and next month change Saved by the Fire.
Right.
Like, those are too close in how they're used.
Right.
But you could definitely do, I don't know that we have the manpower, but you could do monthly updates and kind of continue to gather those data and watch as everything comes through. As long as I think you just want to leave any given update alone for a while, unless it was clearly broken. Like, absolutely backtrack on the thing that you made absolutely, completely meta breaking.
Right. And another wrinkle to this too is that ideally next year, as we do the lead up to the World Championship, we'll have a little more of a structured situation where it's not using the weekend leagues all the time, and instead have like a monthly tournament. And those sorts of situations are where these kind of changes will have a chance to really shine. Because if somebody realizes that, oh man, there's this huge deck that everyone's sleeping on, they're gonna go and take it and try to, actually make a win with it. And so if that sort of situation happens, where holy crap, we errated wargs and gave them a buff, and now somebody won this monthly tournament with wargs, that's gonna get attention.
Right. Well, and it's important to look at it too. Like, sure, they won. They went, 5-0 or whatever. But was each of those games, neck to neck at Site 9, or was he just like Site 4 every single time?
Now, from our perspective, we have to look at that. But one of the things I'm saying is that people's perception is not going to be that nuanced.
Sure.
The fact that we saw so many advanced Marauders and stuff, I think, is a result of the fact that we had a championship where somebody won with advanced Marauders and nobody else played Marauders. And so they were like, "Oh crud!" Well, a bunch of people started using the deck because they were net decking. They were looking for the person that won the tournament, and
and I think some of that is totally fine. Like, if that's going to get people excited about it, it's also going to give us better numbers on, is this deck too powerful when not in the hands of one of the best players?
Yeah.
That's one thing that I was maybe weird about by playing the decks that I wanted to play in the World Championship beforehand, so everybody might copy my decks. But that didn't really happen, or if it happened, they didn't win as much as with me.
And
nobody played the sides from me.
Yeah, I think that everybody makes that mistake because everybody is thinking the same thing. I don't want to give away my secret deck, or else everyone's going to realize how good it is, not understanding that other people are making that same calculus.
Right.
What makes a difference is going to a high-profile event and having it, really blow the socks off of everybody. Now, the one exception to that could be that if you really truly have discovered a brand new, like, game-breaking combo, that could very much get stolen before the event. But I think for anything that's like no more than 55%, 60% like effective, nobody's going to bat an eye until it wins an event, and then yes, everybody's going to start copying.
Well, but winning that event's going to be really key, because seeing it copy it, if basmelis, Faker, Aaron, and Chadwick are all working on this deck because it's definitely the next big thing, and they're convinced of that, and they come in 1st through 4th in the next big event. So, the next day we're all playing that deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if the next day we're all playing that deck and its win rate plummets down to about 51%, maybe there's something about the deck that's really good that we're missing. Or maybe we just had 4 of the best players in the world who happened to be working on the same thing.
And that's another effect too that is well known in the competitive spaces, where people at the top play differently from everyone else. And there's some things that work better in a competitive environment that just don't work in a casual environment, or vice versa. There's some decks that you can totally do well with in casual that will just get you destroyed at a place where people know what they're doing. Right. Like the classic example is a discard deck. Everybody knows how to beat a discard deck. It's easy. So you might be able to slaughter a bunch of people in casual, but competitive will get you eaten alive.
Yeah.
And so that can actually be interesting too, because everybody has that perception again going in that, oh yeah, these are the powerful decks. And so a lot of people are going to try and use those, even competitive minded people, but the really skilled people, the actually like top tier individuals, are going to look at that playing field and do one of two things. They're either going to say, actually, these people don't know what they're talking about, and they're going to, thread the needle through the actually powerful stuff at their level, or they're going to see everybody playing these supposedly powerful decks and then get all the silver bullets that they can that kills that particular thing. And so then they end up building a deck that is only good at the top 8 and nowhere else, because they managed to read the meta better than everyone else. So it's
right. Well, and that's a common thing in this, these kind of card games, is you're going into a big tournament and there are these are the 2 decks, which means if you have a third deck that can beat those 2 decks and only those 2 decks, you might be okay. But that doesn't make that deck good. It just makes it meta busting.
It makes your decision good, and that's I want that environment, right? I want that ecosystem where the decisions are what makes or breaks the whole thing, and those are not the same thing as the decks actually legitimately being good in all situations.
Right, which is why collecting more data is really, really good.
Yeah.
Because, making that org change and then basmelis, destroys everybody at the next movie championship doesn't necessarily mean that org change was too much.
Right.
It means a really good player figured out a way to make it not bad.
Right.
Well, that depends. Do you want to destroy my Dunlin deck, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, your Dunlin deck's a great example of this. I think of Dunlin as generally kind of tier 2 or lower. I don't think of it as the top deck, but I mean, I watched it in action. We saw your games. That it did its job. I've
That's the
played
thing
a
about it.
decent amount of Dunlin over the years, and I've never had a lot of success with it. Like,
But, so maybe Dunlin isn't that good at all, but if you want to change cards because I won with it, that would not be the best deal, because if people play the Dunlin deck that I played, that might not work anymore. Or people see, oh, Dunlin won, every deck puts in 1 or 2 more anti-Dunlin cards, then it will just fall apart.
Yeah.
right. Well, and did Dunlin win because at this level of the championship, the particular fellowships that we saw during the top 8 stage were vulnerable to what Dunlin was doing?
I'm not even sure that's the case, because I think the Faker's deck was practically custom built to destroy Dunlin.
That's true.
Derafin,
It did seem really well teched there.
Yeah, he had the Citadel, the Stars, and other stuff that didn't care about hides. Like, it was. In fact, we were speculating going in that if he went to movie again, it might actually make sense to do a start with like Greenleaf and Derafin and just completely shut it down.
Yeah, Derafin card. But it also, I tested against the deck, and I knew that starting Derafin was a possibility. I played with, just keep hides in hand until you need it, and never play more hides than.
Right.
It brings in, that's the skill of the player. What we do in that situation. I lost to that deck in the group stage. Because I played all 4 of my hides, and then he played Derafin. Another player, it was Pisdeck. He played all. I played all of my hides. He played his Derafin. He had an Elrond with Avilia, so he destroyed all 4 of them, and the game was lost.
Yep.
So from that point on, I thought, I should keep one of those hides in hand to at least have a possibility to win this game. But only I lost the first game because I never expected it to happen. So if someone else has another trick up their sleeve, you can't be prepared for everything.
Yeah.
I don't think that my Dunland was the best positioned at all. But of course he didn't have Elendil. No, there are some cards that just destroy the strategy.
Yeah, and then there's the draw, right? You talk about your first game against the Faker, like.
Yeah.
You can never expect them to have exactly the right draw to use all of the Twilight you've produced in your Flood for Sight 2. Like, that's going to happen sometimes.
It's quite interesting because I could have seen it coming in hindsight, because he started, he didn't mulligan, and he only played 1 card. He played an Elrond, and he discarded an Elrond and drew 2 cards. So the other 6 cards in his hands should be shadow cards. And if you drew 2 more shadow cards, then he might have 8 shadow cards, probably designed to try and kill me on side 2, which he did. So that's also a skill. He did that skillfully. He saw that I was playing the Save from the Fire strategy and thought, I'm keeping this 6 shadow big minion hand, which is horrible in all other situations, but great against mine. And he won. Good decision there.
Yeah, and that, kind of just at this level of play, the quality of players that we're talking about for these, they can really bring these strategies to the forefront, but it doesn't necessarily mean that most of us are going to do well with them.
And that's the interesting balance, I think, between trying to. There's only so much insight that we can get from the competitive scene because of that. but it does interact positively, I think, with the balance concept, because if somebody ends up using any of these cards that we change, then I think that directly impacts how many people give them a shot. So it's but yeah, it's not 1-to-1 for sure.
Witch King in the chat is just pointing out how good the Faker is here. Apparently, he came in second at the Czech Nationals last year, which is the biggest paper tournament in the world. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, it was a great match though. Losing on side 2 is well, he did a great job.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that having these high-level events will definitely, get more cards and strategies into the spotlight and see what happens. But I also think that if you change nothing, then next year things will still be different.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. Yeah,
I think that's definitely true.
We could potentially stick to nothing but like fun and NPE changes, and in an attempt to improve the experience without even bothering with balance. And balance probably would end up shifting over time, just because people will figure out answers and they'll figure things out. So
yeah, whether that shift is going to be to the only fellowship that you should ever play, or to much more than we currently have in the scene, I just that part's hard to say.
And that's the only sorts of concern that make it so that I'm not totally comfortable with just taking my hand off the wheel. I do think that we need to try and direct things in the direction of more variety and less power creep. And those two things do kind of fight each other. So it's
for sure. Yeah, and I think I think kind of within the PC we've got a really good variety there too. Like I know you're really, really passionate about hitting these top strategies, bringing everything down to kind of a set 7 and earlier level, kind of getting more things more playable from that perspective. And on the other end, I know Tunit and I've been talking for months about how we really want to take some of those cards that just aren't played very often but are close to being good enough and bring them up a little bit. And if we do both those things, it's a lot more cards that are playable.
Those two strategies both work. Like, I think that we just need to do more of it. Like, I know that some people look at the situation that we're in and they're like, okay, you got here by doing errata, so maybe you need to do less errata. And I know that it sounds a little strange, but I'm like, well, actually, maybe what we need to do is more errata. Have you considered that?
Yeah, I'm totally on board. And I think as long as we continue to look at what we've already done,
obviously shift how we do things. And there are some mistakes that I think we've made that do need to get fixed. I think the people have made good points about maybe reverting the most recent Lady Redeemed errata, and some of those other ones maybe just need undone. And I'm
right, and that's all I mean is just because we've done something doesn't mean we should be locked into it.
Yeah, so long as our mistakes aren't permanent. Like that was entirely the whole point of doing this, was because Decipher made mistakes that they were never able to undo without just banning the card. So yeah, we just need to not make the same mistake, and yeah, so long as we're flexible.
Lovely option there because we're doing digital play.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm losing steam here. We have been streaming for a long time. Skilled, I know that you've been trying to connect. Every time it seems that you send me a message, I get distracted by what's going on in the stream. My apologies for that. Maybe we can get you on another date. That stinks that we just didn't. I don't know. We just kept not connecting to each other just right. So before we wrap this up, is there anything else that you guys want to say about any particular pet peeve you'd like to bring up, or?
Well, I thought this was a fun evening chatting about the tournament and also possible erratas and future changes.
Yeah, I always like.
I love the work that everyone is doing on the fee sets and erratas and the tournaments themselves. So I think it's everybody's doing a good job doing that.
I know Fnarfin's been excited in hearing you give praise to some of the V1 cards, so that's...
Yeah, he's mentioned that in the channel.
That's good.
And as always here, Ketura, a huge thank you to you for keeping everything afloat. We talk about the PC like it's an organization that's doing all of that, and there's lots of people that are doing great things, but none of this happens without you kind of
that needs to
making
change.
sure we stay going.
But yes, I'm glad to do that in the interim. But I know that at some point, if we keep pushing, we'll attract enough people to make that organization a reality, I think. And in fact, if you're listening to this and you're intrigued or excited by any of this, like, come join us. Like, there's no requirements or anything. Just come start talking, and you can hop on the PC and we can do all kinds of stuff. We need somebody to direct playtesting. We need somebody to be a tournament director. We need somebody to just take control of the whole errata thing and be the last, the last word on that. There's all kinds of positions that need to get filled that aren't, or rather that are getting filled by multiple people wearing multiple hats. And so any help that you want to give, any work that you want to put in, we'll gladly take it and do anything we can to try to build that organization that can shepherd this game for the next 10 years or 20. So yeah, I think that's probably a good point for us to wrap this up. So thank you all for watching. Thank you very much, Basmelis, for coming up, and Aaron and shoot, who was the other guy? Chadwick.
We had Chadwick for a bit.
Yeah, Chadwick was on there for a while. Thank you all for coming on and giving us your thoughts. I hope that in the future we can do more of these sorts of streams, especially as we have more regular tournaments, have more reasons to stream and watch them happen and have reviews afterwards. I think that it's always fun to chat. But yeah, thanks for tuning in.
I like doing these. Let's keep them up.